Going on, Rotogrinders? Dean here, Dean78904. That is the daily fantasy handle. It is 10:30 on the dot on the East Coast, 7:30 West Coast, 9:30 Tennessee time. So, of course, same time for the flagship show here at Rotogrinders. It is called Grinderslive. Joining me today for a fabulous Week 16. It's Grant Neiffer. We're fired up, man. We're already arguing pre-show. Andre is a referee as always. Just we subject him to our nonsense. Apologies, Andre. What's up, Grant? How are things in your world?
Oh, my body apparently can no longer handle drinking nothing but red wine for 48 straight hours.
Yeah, you're not like 20 anymore, Grant.
Oh, I'm not even 30 anymore.
You're no longer spry. Yeah. Yeah. Is that what is that was in the menu for Christmas? You celebrate the Christmas? I don't know. I assume maybe.
I drink red wine all day on Christmas Eve, and I drink red wine all day on Christmas. And then I go to bed and my heart's going 130 beats a minute. I'm like, man, I'm not a healthy human.
You feel okay? I mean, it was better than food poisoning you caught last week from what was it? Pizza Hut possibly? Or not
no, Pizza Hut kept my body from going into full shutdown mode. It was that darn steak sandwich. I shall not besmirch the name of the restaurant because I will be ordering from them again. And just this one location that's terrible. They have like 4, and it's just one location that's just screws me over every time. And I always forget to make sure I order from the slightly further away location on DoorDash.
You got to throw them in the penalty box for at least a couple months, though, if they get food poisoning, I think.
I'll probably be back next week.
Fair enough. All right, what's going on, dude? How are things in your world? How was your Christmas weekend? Good times, I presume, hopefully.
Yeah, it was pretty good. Got to spend time with the family, so it was always a good time to get together with them and just buy and have a good time. So just here to hopefully take down a Slate and win some money.
I feel like we haven't stopped talking football or stopped playing football or stopped watching football. Time is a flat circle. We're back on. It's a Sunday and it doesn't feel like a Sunday. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. But an 11 gamer, of course, lots of players we'll talk about as we go through the slate. Lots of players are not playing today because of injuries and a variety of reasons, and COVID as well. So and some players coming back, and we have a lot of value at running back. It depends on where you're shopping as far as certain players. We have a 4.9K Antonio Brown in Tampa, where he's the last receiver standing on DK, where he's going to be super, super popular. I want to have that conversation as well for tournaments. You want to give me the slate overview, Andre? What are your thoughts here? No team, no game is a total higher than 47, 48. That's the biggest total on the board. The Minnesota game in a dome versus the Rams. That's the game. It's not hiding that. I'm not sleeping in anybody. But otherwise, there's some good quarterbacks and bad spots. We'll talk about it. We'll work our way through it. But give me your slate overview, and I'll throw it over to Grant as well. I'm curious to get his thoughts as far as how he's the 30,000 foot view. What do you have for me, Andre?
To me, the slate to me it's very straightforward in a way, but also can get complicated with some of the value. I just personally think that you just got to take some stands on certain guys and not play them and just hold to it and just hope that it works out when you run your game scripts. But yeah, I think it should be able to really find a way to have a concentrated pool and just hopefully be successful today. Like I said, take stances on some guys who can't play everybody. It doesn't help you win.
Travis Kelce did not pass this COVID protocol today. In case you guys missed that, Kelsey's not going to be available. That's in a late game at 4:00. Of course, you get the actives and inactives an hour and a half before the game. So the 1:00 game, actives and inactives drop at 11:30. Probably, possibly, maybe we'll have a couple of sneaky ones that we're not necessarily suspecting. But and of course, the later games, maybe more news will trickle on through as we're hitting the fourth quarter or so in the early games for the 4:00 games as far as injury, who's in and who's out. But Tyreek Hill is good to go. So he is expected to play later on today for Kansas City. Grant, what do you have for me as far as your general overview on this slate?
I would like to bring up last week where you said there's no way that Zach Wilson outscores Dak Prescott.
I mean, first of all, this is Daily Fantasy Sports. We hear about today and today only. Secondly, I don't know how that was relevant to anything we're talking about so far. Third, I feel like that was Andre that was having the conversation.
Both of you said there's no way.
Well, I mean, I'll take a player versus the field too. And yes, this one player is going to be one player in this field. By I don't know which one. I don't know, but one of them.
I gave you 3 players, and you said, yeah, there's no way he beats any of them. He beat 2 of them, I think. Oh no, I missed Kyler.
I will take a random player versus 3 players, and I'll take the 1 versus the 3. And you didn't tell me which one he was going to beat. That's not helpful. You can't roster like 4 quarterbacks at DFS and say like.
I said to fade the chalk. I didn't say to play Zach Wilson.
I think you said play that.
No, I very specifically over and over again said, don't play. I'm not playing Zach Wilson. Don't play.
There was some terrible quarterback you endorsed. Andre, you remember this conversation?
Yes, there was most certainly. It was Davis Mills.
I played Davis Mills. I'm guilty of that. So.
I was looking good like 5 minutes in.
Yeah, we were looking. I don't know what happened. I was so excited.
So we're playing Davis Mills this week, right?
No, I don't think so. I don't think it's necessary. We have somebody that's kind of sort of somewhat Davis Mills like, I suppose. On DK, especially if you really want to open things up, and the cap is not as tight as it can be on certain weeks. I'm going to pull up our old lineup HQ tool here. Let's look at DraftKings specifically as far as the quarterbacks. There's really not one, like, I don't know. You guys tell me. Grant, you tell me. There's not like one amazing spot. Again, the highest total on the board is 47, 48 or so. Herbert versus Houston should be great in theory. No Eckler expected there on the Chargers. It's a tricky part, of course, is you kind of want some team to run it back with them, some team to push them. And how hard can Houston possibly push Herbert? We shall see. Stay tuned on that, especially without Cooks not expected to play either their top receiver. We have Jalen Hurts, who I don't like Hurts as a reasonably heavily owned. He won't be heavily owned, around 10% or so, just because he's another guy he absolutely needs to be pushed. And are the Giants going to push him? Probably not. So you might throw the ball like 17 times. Of course, he can run for 100 yards on the ground and get in the box twice too, and that's the way you get there as well. But Grant, you tell me, like our highest projected, owned player here as far as DK is Justin Herbert. As far as the cheapie, Josh Johnson, it looks like he's going to be starting today for Baltimore. He has $4K on DK. He's competent, professional backup. He's not like he's somebody we've seen do it in the league for years. He was once a starter for Tampa many years ago, like decent, got a little bit of wheels. I don't know how much you need that savings, but I think he's okay. But again, quarterback for me, Grant, I think it's pretty wide open. And then, Mahomes just not a good spot without Kelsey. We saw Josh Allen was terrible against New England. Of course, different circumstance as far as whether or not, but still not a great matchup there against New England. It's a weird quarterback week for me where I don't love anything,
I'm playing everyone except for
including
Cam Newton or Sam Darnold.
Yeah, that's a mess, right? Like, who knows what's happening there, but it seems like the reports are Darnold's going to get more snaps than initially thought earlier in the week, and you can't, like, if my quarterback is splitting carries or splitting snaps, like, I can't.
Yeah, no, you never hear that with quarterbacks. It's always like, oh yeah, it's going to be a 50-50 timeshare for running backs. Quarterbacks, like, what, why? And they're eliminated from the playoffs, and they're paying now 5 quarterbacks, I think. Something like that.
And Cam's not a part of their future, and it's not like Darnold's. I don't think Darnold's a part of their future. What is the point, right? But I don't know. Does it matter?
Yeah.
Do they have a young guy in Carolina?
And get rid of the incentives.
Oh, there's probably some incentives there lurking
There
there.
are some incentives, and if they say money this year, he'll go. I don't understand stupidity, but in any case, quarterback. I mean, I can get Andre really excited by just saying one of my favorite quarterbacks on the week. Do you know who it is, Andre?
Burrow.
Joe Burrow. I'll let you talk about him first.
I call him Joe.
Yeah, my good friend Joey B.
Yeah, Burrow is like one of obviously my favorite quarterback on the season. I'm going to be well over the field on him, clearly, as usual. Just against Baltimore, their secondary is down to like their second and third string guys and just guys off the practice squad. So this is an advantage I look to try to pair with T. Higgins or Jamar Chase, and just try to hopefully reenact what they did against Baltimore the first time, where Joe had a massive game, and that game was the game where I actually faded him for the 1 week I did. So just play him, lock him in. I think they have a chance for an upside game today as well. And I'm gonna throw it back to Grant on a low quarterback that I know that we both are interested in playing today.
I just got to follow up, Andre, and Grant, feel free to answer too. Like, I guess same sort of thought process. I want Burrow to be pushed. The Bengals are a team that tends to like the run. They'll run the ball. They can get away with it. How much is Baltimore going to push Cincinnati to pass the ball is kind of my question.
Well, I was actually having a conversation with one of my friends this week about this. The quarterback on the other side of the game is the one I really like a lot too today. Josh Johnson. He can run the ball, throw the ball. I was looking into the film a little bit. He actually did. He put in the one game he did start was against Indianapolis, and they actually have a pretty good defense. Clearly, 41 pass attempts. And then he rushed the ball for 4 times. I think he has more. He has rushing upside for sure. And they're gonna have to pass the ball here a lot to keep up. And he has some good targets, obviously, with Marquise Brown and Mark Andrews. And I know the Bengals defense has been pretty good, but they're not nothing to fear, in my opinion. So I don't mind taking a shot on Josh Johnson. And it's at 4K. So how bad can he really hurt you? He can't really kill you or anything like that. The receivers, on fantasy point wise too, in the past 4 weeks, the Bengals are the 8th most giving up to wide receivers and the 4th most to tight ends. So, and they're average against a quarterback. So, which is average of 16 fantasy points. And at 4K, if you even get 16 fantasy points, I could live with that, especially when you're going to be able to jam in all the other receivers into your lineups and possibly have a tight end or Marquise Brown with the upside for a smash game.
Grant, your thoughts as far as Josh Johnson? 4K on DK. The savings probably a little less necessary on Fanduel. You can play him there too if you want. He's $20 on Yahoo, also still a minimum. Your thought, Johnson? Are you playing him on DK or anywhere?
I'm not playing him on DK. I don't have a problem with playing him on DK. I'm going very heavy with him over on Super Draft with the 2x multiplier. Just kind of my way. Like I said, I'm playing every single quarterback today except for Cam Newton because there's drastic differences in strategy and how things should be played on different sites. So for the most part, I will be fading Josh Johnson on DK. I will be underweight.
You're playing Tim Boyle and Jake Fromm?
I'm not playing Jake Fromm. A little bit over on Super Draft. Jake Fromm's at like a 2x multiplier. So that's the only play. And Boyle actually I'm playing a decent amount over on. Are we sure Boyle's any worse than Goff?
I don't think we know. I'm not going to. I guess he's better than Blau. I thought Blau would be the guy. Mr. Blau. That's his name. His name again, Mr. Blau. I guess Blau's not available, or he's not playing, or Boyle's better. I'm not sure, but I can't imagine these in the name. It is a good matchup in theory, right? In a dome against Atlanta,
Juan St. Ra's been playing well. We know that's the main thing. I know who to pair him with. He's a pivot off of Josh Johnson, who's going to be 10+% owned. And Boyle's going to be under 1% owned. Again, not terribly high on him, but I know who to pair him with. He doesn't have many wide receivers.
Hey, Grant, I've asked this question probably every single week for 7 weeks now. This is it, right? Russ is done. Russ, we're done with Russ. You're not playing Russ, are you? We're done with him.
Excellent. Yeah, he's the only other QB I don't have.
I mean, what happened? It's just I hope he's injured, for the sake of him, because I don't want him to be
He hasn't played that
Russ.
bad in recent weeks.
Yeah, he has.
Ugh.
Yeah, like have you looked at his numbers in recent? I get that his team is not winning, but considering his matchups, he hasn't played bad. I have no problem with playing Russ. I'm not doing it just because Pete Carroll. But he has not played bad. He has like a 70% completion percentage, one of the highest yards per attempt in the entire league. He's only thrown one pick. He hasn't played bad, so don't act like he's bad. It's just a matchup versus Chicago with Big Dick Nick in there. And I don't see this game being terribly high paced. I don't see it being terribly high scoring.
Yep. You're playing BDN?
I will have one lineup because I do love that guy.
By the way, that game is the one weather game. I saw Roth in his weather report that the line dropped from 44 to like 42, 41 and a half. Expected some winds and some potential rain as well too. Just throwing it out there. Andre, Matthew Stafford, is certainly in play. I mentioned Herbert. He's kind of like the chalk right now, de facto chalk. Good matchup, reasonable price. Jalen Hurts again. I want quarterbacks to have the ability to throw the ball like 35 times. Like they just won't. And I mean, of course, they can be down 14-0. That can happen, sure, but theoretically, they just want to run it. They run every single week more than pretty much anybody else, including Hurts. I don't know what to do with him, but if he's going to be reasonably popular, I think I'm going to have less than the field. And if he runs in 2 touchdowns, so be it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I might have a little bit of exposure though, just because the Giants are not that great of a team. But the tricky thing about this is a catch-22 because it's a divisional matchup, and divisional matchups, anything can go, anything can happen at any given time. So I'm gonna have a little bit of exposure, but probably under the field on Jalen Hurts. Maybe I'll take a stand and just fade him altogether. But I'd rather get like more so just the parts of in tournaments as well. Like when we get to running back, Miles Sanders is a good play. Devonta Smith or Dallas Scott, I'd rather play those guys and not have Hurts and just let him beat me if he beats me. But I like this is not a spot where I see the upside for Jalen Hurts to get 30 fantasy points. Like this is not a spot where I think it can happen. Yes, it's in the realm of possibilities, but I do not see it happening today, especially against New York. I'd rather, like you said, against a guy like Matt Stafford playing against Minnesota in a good spot. I know he's more money, or even a guy who's 200 cheaper in Kirk Cousins, who is one of my favorite tournament plays as well in the slate, going against the Rams. The Rams have not been that great defensively lately. They've been giving up a lot of yards. I think I want to say like 100. I think it was like 100 yards. I think to wide receivers, especially on the road recently. So that doesn't put no fear in me, and they're also supposed to be getting back Adam Thielen, so I think that'll help out a lot as well. So to me, he's someone I definitely don't mind taking a risk on and seeing how it all pans out and works out for sure today.
So Grant, guys we typically like to roster a quarterback. Josh Allen, tough matchup. He's without a couple of his receivers. Davis and Beasley are not going to be there for Buffalo. We typically like to roster Tom Brady. He's without his two best receivers. He's without his best blocking running back, his best running back in general, in Fournette. And then the third one would be, there's a third team too. It's a good quarterback and a bad matchup, and I'm looking for it now. Oh, Mahomes without Kelsey. So yeah, what are we doing with this? Big names without, their best weapons necessarily. Some to a greater degree than others, and some bad matchups. And for that reason, they're not getting a lot of shine, but they're also still really good. How are you handling it?
I mean, Tampa Bay still has a 27.25 implied team totals. Tom Brady has put up massive outings multiple times a year. It's not like he's without good targets. I mean, he still has Antonio Brown, who's one of the best wide receivers in the league over the last decade. Whether he's great now, I still kind of side on that. They still might throw the ball 50 times. It's a tough matchup going up against Carolina, but the total is high enough where I don't mind playing Brady. I prefer just kind of stacking up the Tampa Bay targets like Ronald Jones, Antonio Brown, like even if you want to go Cameron Brate, like Scotty Miller, Tyler Johnson, all these guys are fine. I plan on using a decent amount of them in pretty much every single site. It's just Brady isn't really the best option here on this slate. Like he's priced up. The chances of him being one of the top scoring quarterbacks on the entire slate is not great. It can still happen. But I just I like the fact that I could pair him really well. So over on Super Draft, I have some of him just because salary isn't really a thing. But I'm avoiding him on DK and mostly avoiding him on Yahoo.
Perriman also out soon for Tampa, just as far as their depth. He's not available. And yeah, basically there's two targets for Brady. He's got Brown and he's got Gronk. And you mentioned, Ronald Jones, the presumed starter now for Tampa, first and second down.
There's two elite targets.
We're not sure what Brown is, to be fair. We don't.
What?
Brown is no. He hasn't played football in 2 months.
Oh,
we don't know.
Yeah, I know. What was he like before that? What was he like all of last year?
He was elite.
Okay.
He put up 20 and 30 points the last two games he played, Daniel. He has 10 targets in 40%
You're pretending like this. He's just gonna step in like he did. He wasn't away for 8 weeks or 7 weeks or whatever.
Yes, he was injured for a few weeks and then he was suspended. He was not seriously injured during the 3-week time.
He was dealing with an injury for a while.
He was dealing with, and then it looked like he was about to come back. And guess what? He got caught for being a big dum-dum. So you really think he's going to change that drastically over 6 weeks?
I don't know. Look, you're speaking with confidence. I'm saying I'm not sure. I don't know.
Take a stand, Daniel.
It's okay to, you know what? It's okay to say, normalize saying you don't know. You don't know something. I don't know. I'm Antonio Brown, especially on DK.
No one knows anything in sports. We do, however, know that Antonio Brown has a high likelihood of posting one of the better scores on this slate.
Yep. The only thing is that it's who's the corner that they got from the Patriots, Carolina again. I'm just worried about him shadowing him. That if he does, and then that's it. Other than that, Antonio Brown's probably going off today.
And Brady obviously likes him. He's always been a big fan of him. He's always at his back. All right, let's talk about running backs. Different conversation depending on what site you're shopping on. If you're playing on Fanduel today, I do not know how you get away from Mattison, who was 5.5 over there. Of course, there's no Cook. That's just insta smash and cash, and you have the conversation about tournaments too. And I'm just curious what we haven't projected as far as our ownership. Probably at least 40%. That's off the dome. Let's see. What is the number for Mattison? Why can't I not find him in the? Oh, I got to scroll up. 54%. Good Lord. That is our projection. He is 5.5 on FanDuel, Andre. He's 6.8 on DK, which is again, how do you not pay for that?
He's $16 on Yahoo.
Yeah, the Yahoo price is ridiculous too.
By the way, Yahoo's giving away a lot of free money today.
Yep.
Yeah, they're giving a lot of free money, and of course, they always have their regular contest, the $1 million contest, which is not full just yet. $250,000 up top, not up top. What's $1 million as far as the prize pool? $100,000 up top, flat payout, 10%, and they're only giving $120,000, $250 as far as overlay, $250,000 as far as overlay. And you know what? We happen to have a promo code for that as well. Grinders 25 for a free $25 bonus on your first deposit. I'm gonna go check out that lobby real quick. I want to see. Yeah, so $200,000 in overlay. Only 26,000 spots out of 40,000 spots have been claimed. And there's also the everyone wins contest where you enter for $1, and worst case scenario, I believe you get your
literally just stop listening to Dean talk for the next minute and throw a lineup in there, and you're automatically at least winning money.
All right. Should we not put the promo out there? Is that
put the promo out there. It's free. It's extra free money on top of free money.
By the way, what up, YouTube? Hit that like button. Do subscribe. Do turn on notifications. Y'all are hanging out on YouTube. You're like, why can I not find the chat? The chat is now on our Discord, rotogrinders.com/Discord. Go to the live stream chat channel. We have a lot of premium channels. We have a lot of free channels. This is one of the free channels. Go to live stream chat. Producer Devin, he's going to be compiling whatever questions you guys may have for us, whatever y'all are talking about during the show. Going to throw it at me later on the show, and we'll be regurgitating those questions on your behalf. And Grant and Andre, they'll be happy to answer them. We'll save plenty of time for that in theory. All right, Andre, let's talk about Mattison. FanDuel, the price is goofy. Yahoo, the price is goofy. DK, it's good. And there's actually running backs kind of deep today too. We talked about the Tampa Bay situation.
It's not actually good on DK. 6.8K is still too cheap.
Yeah, no, I'm saying that. Yeah, of course.
Oh, okay, I see what you mean by good. You're a smart guy sometimes. No one saved that. They just said that.
Andre, yes, Andre, what do you have for me as far as running backs? And start with Mattison. Ronald Jones is always scary because, Tampa seems to hate him. He seems to have an issue blocking. You'd probably want to block for your 46-year-old quarterback. How much do they trust him is kind of the question, but what are their other options?
Yeah, I don't know. Like that's the one thing I'm worried about this week. Then they sign also Le'Veon Bell too. Like is he? I want to know if he's going to be active today, because if he's active, that might cut into Ronald Jones, and I might not want to play as much of him as possible.
Le'Veon Bell was trying to fight Jake Paul a week ago.
He still might.
And he still might. He's already signed. So I think
two-sport athlete.
I think. Like today, for sure, I definitely like out of all the cheap running backs, Ronald Jones is the one I'm going to be under the weight of the field on, probably the most. Just because I don't know the situation. Like every time we hear, like I know people talk about this in the industry a lot too, which is the truth. They talk him up a lot, and then he just doesn't go out there and perform.
You know who else talks him up? Bruce Arians, and then does nothing with it.
And then, that's what I meant. Like it's always that.
My watch just heard me
So
talking about Bruce Arians.
I know last year though, like in this spot, and I know we don't like to go over last year's data, but in this spot against Carolina last year, he did have 23 attempts and did put up 192 yards. So that's always in the back of your mind. So I think being at the field to me is the most I would do. Like I said, but I'm gonna probably be a little bit lower because they did show that they were going to give him a 10. So, and I got to find out just to look at it more in depth to see if Fournette was hurt. So I don't mind getting to him, but not a lot of them. I like even pivoting up a little bit more, a couple dollars, to get into a guy like David Montgomery, who's going to be cheaper, who's going to be lesser owned for sure, going against a bad Seattle defense, front seven. So I'd like to take advantage of that as much as I possibly can, especially in a game that's going to be filled with a little bit of bad weather. So I think that's a good pivot to him as well. Alexander Mattison, nothing to say, but just play him. I think he's a fantastic play today. I think he's still too cheap for his price. And it stands out to me. Justin Jackson as well. We know 4-2, just lock the man in. Like there's nothing to be like to get different from. Just play him. Don't do anything else. Make sure you play at least Justin Jackson in all your lineups. That's how I feel about him. Like going against Houston. It's an easy matchup. He should be able to dominate this matchup and at least have one rushing touchdown and get you value today. But a guy also I like pivoting off to, since everyone's been playing a little bit of Jalen Hurts. I think Miles Sanders is a good value. I think he's going to come probably a little bit lower on than what we have projected at. We have him currently at 12%, but he's someone I think that can definitely have some upside in tournaments and around that price range of where all these guys are and can smash, as well as Devin Singletary, who's been getting a lot of the work lately too. In the backfield against New England, which is going to be a lot harder, but I think a good contrarian GPP play. And we can't forget about James Robinson. That's another one. See, like just play 3 running backs this week and play him in your flex, but James Robinson's a must in my opinion as well.
So Robinson is another one, depending on where you're shopping. 5.9 on DK is a really, really good price there against the Jets. 8.2 versus Fanduel, fine. That's not an amazing price. 26 on Yahoo's fine. But the DK price at 5.9 is really, really good. Yeah, you mentioned the situation there with Jackson. Jackson currently our number one projected own running back on DK at 36.7%. We're assuming Eckler is going to be out. I'm not sure if he's officially out, but he said himself on that Yahoo show earlier this week with Liz Loza. And by the way, Jet McCatch, who else was on that show, Grant, I don't know if you caught that, but Dawson Knox was on there. And Dawson Knox is in a fantasy league with Eckler. And Eckler's like, listen, go pick up Jackson. He's like, if you can't get Jackson, get Kelly. And then, by the way, I don't know if you noticed your little nugget from that was that Dawson Knox, you know the name of his fantasy team is?
Knox and Boots. What
These Nuts is the name of his team. Yeah, there you go.
He didn't even use his own name. That's very not arrogant. I'm bumping him up. I'm gonna play him a little bit more.
Well, he used the nuts, like the spelling like Knox, like it's like KNUTS or something
These
like that.
Nuts?
Yeah. No, these nuts. Never mind. It's not these Knox. Yeah, Grant, all these running backs, it's a good running back week. Mattison should have basically anything he wants there in the backfield, big chunk. Jones is kind of a question mark, but in theory, looks like a good value. Jackson, I mean, I'm a little bit concerned that Kelly might siphon a goal line to catch here or there, or a goal line run here or there. But the price on Jackson's really, really good. I like to play that Andre's talking about as far as Montgomery, especially that game's going to be sloppy. He's probably going to get like 25 touches or so. CEH is kind of interesting to me for Kansas City. But with being without Kelsey, maybe they run the ball a little bit more. I presume they're going to be ahead against Pittsburgh as well. We'll see. Anything you want to add on? Anybody else you want to add to the conversation as far as running backs?
I mean, we didn't talk about DeAndre Swift.
Do we know if he's playing or not? Because Williams might come back too, and why would they play him? Why would they play him a lot? There's no reason to. And this Reynolds has been pretty good. That's my concern.
Yeah, I mean, it is a concern, but we're also trying to look at a pivot off of Ronald Jones, off of James Robinson, off of Montgomery, off of Patterson, off of Sanders, all guys in around the same range. So if you're looking for a low-owned guy, I mean, the two ones that stand off the page are going to be DeAndre Swift, hoping for a big workload. He's playing with a guy that may or may not be terrible, so he could, in fact, get 10 receptions in the spot here and could end up with a touchdown or two going up against one of the worst defenses in the league. And then Javonte Williams, I know Melvin Gordon's still there, but again, he's a pivot. He's 6.1K. He's going to come in low single digits would be my guess. So both those guys are kind of the pivots I want to take. I do not have a ton of interest in Ronald Jones. I think there's too many different bad things that could happen. I will still play him, but I think someone was asking us to rank the top chalky running backs. I think it's Jackson, Robinson, Mattison, then Jones of the top four on pretty much every site outside of Yahoo, where I think it's Mattison clear number one.
Madison's clear number one on Fanduel.
Yeah.
5-5. Yeah. I'm just, again, he hasn't played. Swift hasn't played, in 3 weeks, 4 weeks or something like that. And they've had a guy, Craig Reynolds, this person, who's done pretty well. Jamal Williams might be available too. They might have 4 backs. I just don't know why in the world, Andre, why would they push Swift? What's their incentive? There's no reason to. Maybe he breaks one off, sure, but I don't think he's a big volume guy. Maybe I'm wrong.
I mean, if he's healthy, if he's coming back, then I think he's healthy to play. I don't mind him as a tournament play because it's going against a defense in Atlanta who they've been playing a little bit better of late, but I think you can still run the ball effectively on Atlanta and still also be able to catch passes out the backfield against Atlanta. So to me, Swift is someone that would be in play, especially at 6'3", with his skill set of what he does. And hopefully he'll be and he'll also be a great check down option for this quarterback. So I don't mind getting to Swift if he's active, but I'll just limit my exposure to only maybe 5% of him and not get be well over the field on him or anything like that.
So here's one that's nobody's talking about that could be interesting, kind of popping up late. No Ramondre Stevenson. I presume Damian Harris is going to be good to go. I saw him questionable, but I think he's going to play. We saw, of course, last game against Buffalo. That's all I did was run. Again, that was kind of game conditions, influence to some degree. But is Damian Harris kind of sort of someone interesting? No Stevenson, Grant. Is he somebody that could be a little bit off the board? And Cordell Patterson is another one. Different kind of running back, obviously, but as long as you get fantasy points, I don't care how you're compiling it. Do those two guys do anything for you?
Yeah, I do like Harris a bit. Depends on which site. I think DraftKings, who's playable super draft. He's probably a little bit too low multiplier, but he is a guy that without Stevenson in there can end up getting just a boatload of carries. He can do a lot with it. Someone was mentioning in chat, why aren't we talking about him? He crushed Buffalo last time he played. Well, that was a win game. That was a little bit different. I'm not expecting Mac Jones to run the ball 3 times. Bill Belichick loves to run the ball, and so it's still a pretty solid overall play. I definitely don't mind it.
Yeah, Mac Jones threw the ball in the game 3 times, I believe. They won, and their conditions were ridiculous. If you guys remember, that was a Monday nighter. What was this? I don't know. It felt like it was 14-7 or something. It was a terrible game. It was not a fun game to watch for sure. I remember we watched that on our Monday night show. Andre, anything else as far as running backs? Can't run through every single one, obviously, but anybody else that's kind of noteworthy, worth pointing out? Just kind of scrolling through really quickly. Rex Burkhead, in theory, is the guy for Houston with the absence of David Johnson, but it's still Rex Burkhead.
I like into a little bit of Najee Harris at the top. No one's going to be spending up top, so that's a way to get different going against Kansas City. Joe Mixon as well. No one's going to be playing him. Pretty much spending up a little bit if you can. Patterson, Cordell Patterson, and Javonte Williams. These guys I like getting to are going to be low or lower owned. So I like probably playing like two of these low guys, and then probably spending
Little
up.
guys.
And then Josh Jacobs as well. I think he's a good tournament option, being able that he catches a little pass at the backfield now.
Grant, listen, anybody else to add to the conversation, feel free to talk about receiver. We already talked about Antonio Brown. Very specific on DK. The price is really, really appealing. First player put in your cash game, if not your first,
Second
second
player
or your third.
Yeah, the first two players you should probably put in your cash
Cooper Kupp.
game. First three, I guess, is Jackson, Kupp, Brown.
Yeah, and probably James Robinson at 5'9". You're gonna have a lot of duplications today in cash if you're playing a cash on DraftKings.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean Cooper Kupp. What do we have to tell? It's week 16, Grant. What are we telling people about Cooper Kupp they don't already know? Or like he's awesome. You have the salary for it. He's going to be heavily owned. Like a 9K player is we're projecting 40%, 38% ownership on, which is and then there's Tyreek right there too. And Tyreek in theory gets a couple of those Kelsey targets shuffled his way. 8.4K as far as the difference in price. Jefferson's been incredible, just awesome. Thielen coming back in theory probably hurts him a little bit as far as targets. Maybe helps him a little bit as far as an efficiency. I'm not really sure. And then Keenan Allen without Big Mike is another one. Diggs, nobody's playing Diggs, I don't think, in a tough matchup versus New England. Deontay Johnson's is a potential run back if you're playing a KC stack on that Pittsburgh side. And then Chase had his biggest game, I believe his biggest game of the year, or his career, I guess we can say, against the opponent he's playing today in Baltimore. I think he got loose for 200 yards or so in the secondary. We haven't really seen it in a while. Seen flashes, we've seen upside, but has not really been there. Grant, your thoughts as far as these upper echelon receivers?
My wide receiver pool is massive, but if we're talking about the upper echelon ones, I mean, I have a lot of Kupp and I have a lot of Jefferson. I mean, it depends on which site you're playing on. Obviously, the ability to pay up for Kupp kind of makes him a necessity, but I think Jefferson's probably just as good, if not better of a play. He's going to come in at half the ownership. He's playing in the same game. I know that he might get some Ramsey defense, but like I already have I already set the rule, one of Thielen, Jefferson, or Mattison in every single lineup across every single site. I want one of these pieces is going to go off for a big game. Minnesota always stays close. So yeah, I plan on playing a lot, but Thielen is a pretty decent spend up. It looks like he's going to be back today. I think they haven't officially announced it because the injury report hasn't come out, but Schefter tweeted that he's going to end up playing. Thielen is probably not getting Ramsey defense. And so there is the chance that Thielen goes off for one of his 25, 30-point games here. He's going to come in at almost 0% ownership. He's 6.9K. Nice. And he's a guy that I think could end up breaking the slate. Another guy that is kind of interest, or two guys that are kind of interesting there in the cheaper range, are Russell Gage, who has been playing very well recently, is getting overlooked by most people and is a little bit too cheap at 5.9K. He's a guy I really like, considering he's pretty much taken over the Ridley role, and Pitts is just doomed to have me play him every single week and then put up a dud, but just enough where I might come back next week. And then a real tournament flyer is Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like, he has been doing fantastic the last 3 weeks. I really don't have anyone to throw it to outside of Swift with him coming back here. But Ra's been getting 10+ targets. I know they have a different quarterback in there. Again, we're not really sure if he's any worse than Goff. So he's a guy that I think could end up with a pretty decent game here. But I have a very big player pool when it comes to wide receivers this week, and I have no idea where I'm going to end up with a lot of guys.
Andre, thoughts on a bunch of names thrown out there? Who stands out for you?
I agree with all those guys, especially the Justin Jefferson call and Thielen call. I like that rule that you said, Grant, too, having like at least one of them in every single lineup. I think that's because one of them guys is definitely going to go off today for sure against the Rams. So those are the guys I definitely love to get to. Jamar Chase, probably is my next favorite besides Jefferson and Thielen and Cooper Kupp, who obviously we know is one of the best plays easily on the slate. on almost every slate, we should say. So yeah, Jamar Chase is the matchup. I'm just worried about. I just want to know how they're going to play him. But so I like getting to maybe a little bit of more T Higgins in the field is because everyone's going to probably try to be on Jamar Chase, I think, as much as it possibly can, which I don't mind either. I'm going to get that and over. But T Higgins, I think, can also maybe take advantage of this matchup as well, so because they might be paying more special attention to Jamar Chase because no defense. Me being a guy who played corner and played defense, I don't want to see a guy put up 200 yards on me again. I don't. So I'm gonna do whatever I can in my power to make sure he does not do that and limit him. So they might end up paying more extra special attention to that. So therefore, I like getting to a guy like I said, T Higgins for sure today. Russell Gage mentioned, which is a phenomenal play. I think we also should not forget about the other receivers on the Rams, like Odell Beckham and Van Jefferson. I think those guys can still have pretty decent games and really good games. And they're in the 5K range. So I love getting to one of those guys for sure. Josh Palmer, now that Mike Williams has been ruled out against Houston, he's 3.3K. That guy, he just needs a couple catches and maybe even not even a touchdown, and he hits value. So I think that he's a fantastic play today, because especially with Herbert, when he can throw the deep ball to him and get him downfield. So I like that play a lot today for sure. And one other guy I do like getting to a little bit in tournaments that I don't think we mentioned really was spend up Deontay Johnson. Ben Roethlisberger is back to giving him a lot of targets and a lot of looks. So I personally think the Steelers outright win today this week. I think they're trying to find a way to get the ball in their best player's hands as much as they possibly can. So I like Deontay Johnson to possibly have a monster game here today.
You know the money for Deontay. I don't hate Clay either. Chase Claypool, his teammate as a run back as well.
Chasing him a long time ago.
Oh boy, really? Is that the fun we're going with? Yeah, he's had a weird couple of weeks.
Oh, because his name was not intentional.
Just sort of happened organically. So Grant, amongst the cheapies today, Andre hit on Palmer. Palmer seems to be the best cheapie. There's also, like, I was looking at Barrios earlier in the week. We're expecting Crowder not to go for the Jets, and in theory, they're going to catch the ball. Somebody's going to catch the ball. Cook's not there for Houston, so Nico Collins is their number one de facto receiver. Nico Collins is
my favorite. I
like Nico too.
Yeah. So again, kind of the same thought process I had last week, which didn't end up working out because they only threw the ball 30 times because they were ahead the entire game. They are willing to let him throw 50 times in a game. The game script is a very positive one for him here. So the reason I'm playing Mills is because I like Nico Collins so much. And I think playing him and probably Jordan, Brevin Jordan, and then I don't know. I'm trying to figure out. I'm probably going to mix and match with a few, all 100% Collins when I have Mills in the lineup. But then I'm just mixing and match between Brevin Jordan, Danny Amendola, Chris Conley, Dorsett. These are all guys that were all right wide receivers at some point. I could see Mills going for 250, 300 yards here and a few touchdowns just because Houston seems to surprise us every single week with what they're doing. But anytime I can get a quarterback with every single one of his receiving options under 3.5K, I double stack him a few times.
I was also going to add McKenzie to the conversation for Buffalo. They're down a couple of receivers. Manny Sanders, who's been rough all year, but he's down to 4K on DK. Just throwing a couple other wide receivers out there. We do have some questions compiling. We're going to get to those in just a second. Do want to mention, you guys know Chief Justice Will. He's got his prop shop. Y'all can take him down today in the Thrive Fantasy Free Roll for a chance to win free Rotogrinders Premium. New users can get a 100% deposit bonus up to $250 as well as a free $20 contest ticket by using the promo code Grinders, GRINDERS. Not in this, but I feel like I read it elsewhere. Feel free to tell me otherwise in my ear, Devin. But I believe if you just beat Chief, you get yourself 5 days free of Scores and Odds Premium. Myself, Grant, Andre, a plethora of other people are giving picks over there. Get and yourself 5 days. Yeah, theoretically, that's how that goes down. It's good times for sure. Yeah, Devin, is that true? Can you confirm that? All right. Pretty much is good enough. Sure, why not?
Probably
Tight
give out a
ends.
free bet today.
We'll put a couple in the Discord if you don't mind.
I haven't bet them yet because most of the basketball bets were not up beforehand, and I'm not bothering with football on this COVID slate.
Wait, basketball or football?
I'm not bothering with football. I'll throw in some basketball bets.
Oh, I got you. Okay. Andre, tight ends. Gronk, he should smash today. Looking like one of the top tight ends on the board. As far as like cheapies to save salary, there's not a lot out there. It's exciting. Goddard's fine. The price has gone up a little bit, but like he gets a massive target share. It's just that like nobody else, they don't throw the ball. So he gets a big chunk of the percentage, but like still only so many balls coming his way. I saw Komet like popping to some degree. I'm not thrilled about that. That's DK specific. We always looking for a cheap tight end on DK. What about the guy for Kansas City that's going to step in? I meant to learn about Noah Gray, but I think Blake Bell is also available. Once a quarterback for Oklahoma many years ago, but they do have other bodies now. Earlier in the week, it was thought that Gray would be the only tight end, but I guess they have Bell now, who's back from the COVID. What do you have for me as far as tight ends there, Andre?
Yeah, I only have 7 in my pool today. I'm not getting tricky with it or anything like that. I'm sticking to it. Because we got some still guys at low ownership that are in good positions, like Kyle Pitts, for instance. He's only coming out 4.2K. I mean, 4%. I understand that he hasn't been performing lately because Russell Gates has been getting a lot of the work, but I still think Kyle Pitts is in for a monster game where he had at the beginning of the season, in the middle of the season, I should say, back in October when he had back-to-back weeks of good games. So I like him today. Gronk as well. Mark Andrews is a good spend up. Dawson Knox, I think, is a sneaky one. Because in that game, even in that bad weather game, he got I think 6 targets in that bad weather game, and they still had Sanders. So I think did Sanders get hurt that game? I believe. I think that's the game that Sanders got hurt, but Gabriel Davis stepped in and played well, and then they still had Cole Beasley there. So now when you don't have Cole Beasley, Sanders is possibly coming back, but it's more so probable. I think you can see upwards of 10, maybe more targets for Dawson Knox today, and I like him today as a play at low ownership. Dallas Goedert is going to get a lot of attention, but Jared Cook as well. So I like to get to a lot of.
Grant, quick thoughts as far as tight ends. I do want to get to these questions from the chat. Of course, we step aside in about 4 minutes or so, make way for Ben and Erik, who have a large, galaxy brain GPP conversation regarding this slate. And then later on, crunch time, they'll have a recap. They'll do position, the same sort of deal. They'll update you as far as what's going on with the actives and inactives, and they'll also knock out whatever questions we don't answer. Hey, Grant, shortly, give me a quick thought process as far as tight ends.
Playing a ton of Foster Moreau. Yeah, not happy about it.
Yeah,
tight ends trash like Gronk, probably Goddard are the only two that are really stand out as great plays. So I'm just kind of doing double stacks with tight ends.
Andre, question for you. FanDuel tournaments, how much exposure do you think you'll have to Kupp and Tyreek? It's not that hard to get them. Do you think you'll have a bunch of Kupp and Tyreek and FanDuel?
Not together. I'm only running like 2 lineups out there, so I'm gonna have Kupp in both of them. Not having Tyreek probably at all, honestly.
Grant, any CEH today? Yeah, like the Pittsburgh defense, the run defense has been rough. I think CEH is kind of interesting, actually. What are your thoughts?
I don't hate him. I don't love him though. I mean, Williams is still there, so like they may end up using him a decent amount because of his role in the pass game without Kelsey.
Andre, FanDuel single entry contest from Alex. Okay, this is a twofer, right? So Rojo and Kupp chalk versus the CPAT and Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown won't be as heavily owned on FanDuel. Like that's pretty clear. I think he's 7K over there. So do you like Rojo? This is for single entry. Rojo and Kupp versus CPAT and Antonio Brown.
CPAT and Antonio Brown.
Grant, I'll give you a second to think of this one. Your favorite FanDuel tournament, low-owned salary relief play. Unless you happen to have one off the dome, by all means, but I'll give you a second.
I'm not even playing on FanDuel today. So ask that to Dre. Dre, who's yours?
Who's the running back? What is it? Is it not Mattison? Is it Jackson, right? No, Justin Jackson. He's I think extremely cheap over there. I'm correct. Let me double check. Yeah, he's 5'4" on FanDuel. Justin Jackson's 5'4" on FanDuel.
Grant, I love this question. It's a low-owned play that Will's in capital letters, will be in the Money Maker winner. So DK, low-owned player.
Nico Collins. Actually, I want to go even lower owned than that. I'm going Adam Thielen.
Tight end Gentry filling in for Pittsburgh. Like, is Gentry even like a pass catching tight end? I just did a quick search, by the way. Noah Gray did catch the ball in college. I want to see what Kansas City's doing, and he has the capability of catching a football for what it's worth. And if he's a starter, I think he's 2.5K on DK, which is kind of sort of somewhat interesting. How about Gage? Yeah. So Andre, correlation wise, how do Gage and Pitt correlate?
Not well.
Yeah, they don't correlate well. They both attack the middle. They both are more like attack the middle of the field a lot. So I wouldn't pair them together.
I mean, maybe you compare them together if you're playing Matt Ryan.
Yeah, you're playing Matt Ryan in that scenario.
Otherwise, you're probably not playing them together. It's probably a bad idea. Grant, any interest in Treadwell? Good matchup there.
I do have a little bit of interest in Treadwell. He's looked good recently with all the other salary savers there. He's going to be very overlooked. He's slowly turning into Lawrence's guy more and more. Marvin Jones is slowly slipping into fantasy. I don't know. But yeah, I like Treadwell.
Marvin Jones hurt me last week, man. I thought for sure he was going to do.
He's hurt you like what, 12 weeks in a row?
No, I haven't played him a lot. I picked my spots, and
he's hurt a lot of people 12 weeks in a row.
Yeah, I haven't been playing him, but I thought last week was finally a good spot to get it. All right, Andre, your favorite stack, your favorite something, somebody that's taking something down, somebody you're gonna be heavily overweight on. Give the people something before we step aside and get out of here.
Favorite stack is gonna be Joe Burrow to Jamar Chase. Heavy overweight on, goodness gracious. I'm gonna say probably Justin Jackson for right now. I'm gonna be well over the weight on him, probably almost 100%. And also over the weight the field on. I didn't talk about him a lot, but Matt Ryan and Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, I want to
raise it
at Matt Ryan to Russell Gage. I didn't talk for some reason too much at quarterback. Like Matt Ryan has had the toughest schedule over like the last 8 weeks. Prior to that, he was actually putting up good numbers. Now he gets Detroit. Like Matt Ryan is a fantastic tournament play, and that, like I already said, I really like Russell Gage.
Optimizers like Matt Ryan, which is always a comfortable thing for sure. But yeah, I get it, kind of, sort of, somewhat, except when you realize it's Matt Ryan. But I'll probably play.
He was good before he's faced the top 7 defenses over the course of 7 weeks.
We gotta go. We gotta step aside and get out of here. Make way for Ben and Erik. That was Andre. That was Grant. That was Devin producing. I was gonna say do it the like button your way out. You're not going anywhere. You're sticking around for Ben and Erik, and I believe we will have Beermakersfan his 6-pack as the bridge to the next show. Thanks, Devin, for producing. Thanks for watching. Hit that like button. Andre, Grant, Football, Dean. We're out of here. Holler.
Back in the Fantasy Bar, 6 plays for you for week 16 on FanDuel and DraftKings, including a couple running backs I think are too cheap in the mid-range, some of my favorite value plays, my favorite stack of the week, and of course, my favorite play. Who we talking about? Belly up to the Fantasy Bar and find out. Welcome in, guys. Week 16 edition Beers Daily Fantasy 6-pack as we tick towards the end of the regular season. We are here with 6 more plays for you on the main slate on FanDuel and DraftKings. Thank you, as always, for stopping by. Happy holidays to everybody out there as well. Now, before we get into the plays, as always, let's hit that thumbs up button, guys. Greatly appreciate that. You guys have been crushing that. So thank you for that. Make sure you're subscribing to the channel. Get notified when these videos are coming out. Doing multiple football videos, a betting video, basketball video. So get that subscription going. Make sure you're notified when these videos are going out. And if you're into sports betting at all, check out scoresandodds.com/beer for all of your sports betting needs. That link right there in the description of the video, but tons of information there. I promise you're going to like what you see there. Go and check it out today. All right, let's get into week 16 here on the main slate. Let's start with one of those running backs I mentioned in the opening. we're going back to the well on Javonte Williams of the Broncos. So I fully realize this is still a committee. Melvin Gordon is not going away, but we're starting to see the pendulum swing a little bit in favor of Javonte Williams. We look at the snap counts from last week. You're going to see a 44-31 advantage here for the youngster. And Melvin Gordon's still dealing with some injuries as of this recording. So Williams' piece of the pie is going to grow. Really want to be overweight on him this week in my DFS contest. We're talking 16 or more touches now in every one of the last 4 games, averaging over 20 touches over that stretch here. And Vegas been terrible against running backs this year. 3rd most fantasy points allowed to this position. So Javonte Williams still too cheap, even in that committee with Melvin Gordon. Love this spot from this week against the Vegas Raiders. All right, let's get you a value play at wide receiver. We're going to Tampa Bay with Tyler Johnson. Now, I realize the headliner this week will be Antonio Brown returning to that Tampa Bay lineup. Certainly no issues with Antonio Brown as a play. Gronk will also be a guy people go to. But Tyler Johnson, the guy I'm really expecting to step up here. We know Chris Godwin going to miss the rest of the season. Mike Evans questionable as of now, but more on the doubtful side, it seems like. Even if Evans plays, I still like Tyler Johnson. We know they love to utilize these 3 wide receiver sets. If Evans is out, all systems go here for Johnson. For me, going to be off the radar for sure. I don't think you're going to get a ton of ownership on this kid, but look good in that ugly game against New Orleans. 7 targets there. Great pedigree coming out of the University of Minnesota. And Carolina, bottom 10 in the league in touchdowns allowed to this position. So just simply too cheap here in a Tom Brady-led offense. Tyler Johnson, great value this week on both Fanduel and Draftkings. All right, let's continue the value at tight end. We're going to roll with Cole Kmet of the Bears. Now, tight end, once again, ugly position here. So I'm going to go cheap rather than spend up on some of the premium guys. Still have some question marks with those guys. Don't have Kittle on this slate. But Cole Kmet, a guy whose role is really starting to grow in this passing game for Chicago. We know they've been without Allen Robinson, so it's really slim pickings here. Outside of Darnell Mooney, Cole Kmet probably the 2nd target in this offense, and we are certainly seeing that. It's averaging 8 targets per game over the last month. No touchdowns this year for Cole Kmet, which I found very surprising here. Seattle been very giving in that department. 8 touchdowns so far to this position. So I think that's a nice little marriage that we can put together there. Maybe Cole Kmet finds the end zone here, but Seattle not been good against this position as you'd expect. You give up 8 touchdowns, you're likely giving up a lot of fantasy points, and that's certainly the case. 6th most to this position. Cole Kmet, another great value here this week on both sides. All right, let's go back to the running back guy really high on this week. Sure, a lot of people are. James Robinson of the Jaguars. So yes, this is chalk. He's going to be a popular play, no doubt, but this is going to be a popular play for a reason. James Robinson in an amazing spot here against the New York Jets. Too cheap on DraftKings. I mean, under 6K for this guy is a steal. Fanduel probably priced where he should be, so maybe ownership isn't as high over there, but I like him for a lot of different reasons on both sides. First of all, awful game last week against Houston. Houston ends up rolling them. Still got 21 touches in that game. We know Carlos Hyde was placed on IR. No Urban Meyer either, so there's a lack of competition here. So it gives us that workhorse price at a committee-back price here, especially on DK, like I mentioned, at just $5,900. And the Jets, the matchup does not get any better than this team. 21 rushing touchdowns already allowed. Absolutely the most fantasy points allowed. It's not even close. Let's keep pounding this matchup here. Let's go back to the well on James Robinson this week against the New York Jets. All right, back to the wide receiver position. We're going to spend up a little bit here on Jamar Chase of the Bengals. So coming off an absolute dud, Cincinnati goes to Denver, gets the win. It was an ugly game. Jamar Chase literally did nothing in that game. So I think you're going to see a lot of people shy away. We know a lot of the newer players, the masses tend to look at, what have you done for me lately? They're going to pass on Jamar Chase here at this price tag. I think that's a big time mistake. If you think back to the last time he played this Baltimore Ravens team, we saw a massive game out of Chase. 8 receptions, over 200 yards receiving in that game, and a touchdown. Baltimore been terrible against wideouts. 7th most receiving yards allowed, 11th most fantasy points to this position. Expecting a big bounce back here for Jamar Chase at a discount in the ownership department. Sign me up here on both sites this week against the Baltimore Ravens. All right, it's time to take a look at my favorite play for week 16. Before we do that, we want to continue our Beast of the Week contest. Say thank you to you guys for hanging out in the fantasy bar, checking out the video. All you got to do, get in the comment section right below the video and guess fantasy points on DraftKings for my favorite play of the week. Closest guess is going to win themselves a free month of Rotogrinders Premium. Chance to check everything out behind the scenes. Without further ado, let's wrap this baby up my favorite play for week 16, Master Beast of the week. All right, Beast time. We still owe you a quarterback, so we're going to pair up the aforementioned Jamar Chase with his college quarterback, his pro quarterback, Joe Burrow of the Cincinnati Bengals, this week's Beast of the week. Now, Joe Burrow been phenomenal this season. I know there's been some down games, some ugly games. We mentioned that game in Denver, but all in all, we're talking about 7 games where he's gone 20 or more DraftKings points so far this season. Again, we went back to Baltimore on our Jamar Chase tape. Let's go back to it here on Joe Burrow.
What is going on, guys? Welcome to week 16. We're almost done. We're almost made it through the season. Final GPP tournament takes on Rotogrinders.com. Hope everybody had a wonderful holiday. I did, and it was a great break, right? You take a little bit of stuff away. We even got some football on Christmas, and we get this atrocity of a slate dumped on us here today. So I'm really excited to talk to Ben, my co-host, as always, at Yards Per Gretch on Twitter. Ben Gretch, author of the Stealing Signals newsletter, which is going to be, I feel like at the beginning of the season, I'll pump you up a little bit when we start the show and whatnot and talk about the newsletter. And about like week 9 on, I'm like, Ben, I need you. Like, we're like, Ben, Stealing Signals is really important this week because like everybody is out. We got COVID all over the place. We got injuries. We're late in the season. And I think this slate is a really good example of that. We were talking before the show just about how many good projected, not just values, but just good project. I mean, even the high end guys, right? The superstar wide receivers and all that project really well. So I'm trying to, lead in with a kind of a macro take about this slate. And I think that's maybe the most important thing is on some slates, even like maybe last week, actually, you could really kind of dig deep a little bit to some pretty contrarian tournament plays without giving up too much. This week, I'm scrolling through projections and, like the 10th best projection at a position is like a really, really like would have been one of the best plays of the slate last week. And so I think that's kind of the big thing to kind of talk about first, and then we can dive into some of the positions. I was just curious if kind of that was your general takeaway too.
Yeah, it definitely feels like there's a lot of value. Definitely feels like it's going to be hard to build lineups that don't eat some chalk. We often talk about that. And so for me, I mean, whenever we get on these slates, we talk about on the show all the time, it's finding ways to kind of correlate intelligently and getting some of that chalk. I mean, some of this chalk is going to wind up being such good values. They're going to get there on points, but I think you want to find ways to build lineups that maximize the potential that you can win if you have those players in your lineup, which is going to be correlating within the game and doing some different things that get you onto low owned pieces that can succeed with those plays. Right. You mentioned, the signals being better early in the year. I always say it's like it's at its best, the first couple months, but this year's been so crazy. I mean, and one guy this week that I've been telling people in seasonal leagues to stash as my favorite stash going into the playoffs for a couple of months when he was like pretty addable in every single league was Justin Jackson, because it really did feel like he was going to be the clear backup. I'm a little bit bummed that like Austin Eckler came out and was like, yeah, Justin Jackson's the backup, and he's been getting additional run these last couple of weeks. So now he's projecting like he's going to be very, widely rostered. And so, my take was a couple times early in the year, Eckler got checked for a concussion. He got banged up in another game, and Jackson immediately came in and ran the routes, which was the key thing. They use guys like Joshua Kelly, Larry Roundtree as the big back. It's kind of very similar to the way the Saints have always used to do it with Kamara and Ingram, or Kamara and whoever else is the big back, Latavius Murray. Jackson appeared all year, I think, to be the guy who was going to be in line for Eckler's role. The question for him from a ceiling perspective will be, will he get the goal line work? I think it's a very positive thing for him that Josh Kelly fumbled on the goal line last week, and Jackson has got a little bit of green zone work. I think he's going to run the routes. I think that offense is going to continue to generate, targets and touchdowns, obviously, in this matchup against Houston. They're going to score points. So he's a really interesting one to get to, but there's so many other good plays. James Robinson, Alexander Mattison has hit every time Dalvin Cook has been out. David Montgomery, Ronald Jones. I think that's sort of the big group at running back that we have to play through. I'm just seeing some inactives while you were opening up. We have Swift out confirmed. We have Breed out this week. I don't know how much that changes things for the Bills, but it is interesting. They'll have Zach Moss active again alongside Devin Singletary. And then we also have Damian Harris active on the other side of that Bills-Patriots game. And Ramondre Stevenson has been out for the last few days. That's been known. So those are all kind of little interesting ones as well, but I don't think they really are heavily in play here.
I think that's a big thing at the running back position. So I love that you led in with Justin Jackson because, I love to kind of think about basically discussing the fragility of these guys, right? And you mentioned the pass catching. Anytime you can get this super cheap back in a plus matchup, right? Houston is one of the best matchups that you can get. He's also on, it's also not even like he's on a bad team, right? He's on one of the best offenses in the NFL. And like you said, he's going to catch those passes. Anytime you're getting that pass catching role, even without the goal line role, the fragility is so much lower than even like Ronald Jones, right? I like Ronald Jones today. He projects well. I think he might, but it's tougher to say 100% exactly what role Rojo is going to get. Like the goal line thing, probably, but you also always have the little bit thing in the back of your head with someone like Rojo that if they just get down there real quick, maybe they're an empty or something, and they get down there and Brady goes in quick snaps and Rojo's just happened to not in the game, right? Brady is a little bit more of a gamer, a gamesman. He's running the show out there as opposed to not the Justin Herbert isn't, but you just remove a lot of fragility about Justin Jackson. So I think he is maybe I think, again, going back to the macro thing, there's so many good plays that I think almost no one is unfadable. Almost no one is unfadable because you do have other plays that project really well. But the big thing, you hit on it right when you first started talking, is every team every DFS lineup needs to be constructed in a way that what do you get if you're right on this, right? We did, there's a long running joke bit, whatever you want to call it, about your lineup needs to tell a story. And that's true every week. But on these, I actually feel on these weeks where there's the 15th best running back would have been the third best running back last week, maybe even better, right? There was no one to play last week. This week, it's dude, these other guys are still really good plays. And so you have to toe this line of projection and leverage and everything like that. But how you do that and get paid off is making sure that your lineup makes sense, right? Correlation, leverage, all those kinds of things while making sure that you're still getting a strong projection, right? If you're getting a 1% guy, I'm not saying there aren't good plays that are 1% today. I haven't run down the full roster, but if you're playing multiple 1% guys today, you're probably doing it wrong, right? Maybe there's one super low owned guy in your team that's that correlation fitter, right? Maybe he is leverage or something like that. But when you get these crazy strong projection slates, it's all about that, making sure that lineup all fits together, right? Even your secondary pieces, because you need to hit on multiple games going right, multiple little, the touchdown has to go your way, right? Justin Jackson maybe catches that touchdown or whatever. You need to hit on those things. So I think the running back thing, and Justin Jackson is the one guy that I think is the toughest, in a vacuum to fade, given everything about his offense, his role, his matchup and everything. I do think the running back position beyond him, I love Alexander Mattison. Also, I'm a fairly decent Rojo fan. So I kind of like him, but beyond Jackson, solely because of his price, I think everyone else is in the second tier to me. I could absolutely be, I'm willing to be proved wrong on that, but there's a bunch of guys that are 5 to 7K, all lumped in there, all project close enough, at least from a point per dollar perspective to each other. I think Mattison might be my favorite, but we can even scroll down the list a little bit further and probably find guys that I really like that are, a little bit more off the path. How are you feeling about the non-Jackson running backs, kind of those next, probably 5 to 10 guys?
Yeah, I think they're, I agree with you. I think they're sort of a second tier, and I think there are some other plays as well that project okay at running back that might catch a little bit, lower ownership. It seems like there's a little bit easier ways to pivot there. The best receiver plays in terms of projection are Antonio Brown. Joshua Palmer's looking really good as a cheap receiver. There's a couple other cheap receivers as well, but Antonio Brown is another one, is sort of like the Jackson at receiver, where it's I mean, he's back now, and they have no Evans and Godwin. We know what his target rate is like if he's going to be playing a lot. It's really hard to see him not get just absolutely peppered with volume today. And he's very cheap for what that
4,900,
yeah.
4,900. We
So
used to be talking about like Jamison Crowder used to be 4,900, and now Antonio Brown without those guys is 4,900.
It's crazy.
I agree. It's nuts.
In a fantastic spot. And so, yeah, I was kind of switching over to receiver to say that I think there are some other pivots at running back that are a little bit easier to make than there are, for some of those receivers. Obviously, receivers are a little different. You're going to be stacking, you're going to be correlating in those ways, but it's deeper at running back is what I'm getting at. And so, I mean, I think there are some ways you can go off of some of those other guys. You mentioned Jones. I've always been a big fan of Jones from a talent perspective. It's an interesting one where like I would be excited to play him. I'm not super confident in his receiving role. I do think that Brady's going to throw to the running backs a decent amount, though. Obviously, he always does, and we have the top receivers out. Jones probably won't play on passing downs. Almost certainly won't. I think we know that sort of about how they view him, but he will run some routes on early downs if he's the lead back. And so if he's carrying 15 plus times, he's also probably going to get in this offense a couple of catches on the early downs, which is helpful. But the big thing for him is, I mean, over on Fanduel, you have half point per PPR. We know that backs like him can succeed. If he has a 100-yard rushing day and a touchdown, that can be very useful over there. On DK, the 100-yard bonus is also, he might be one of the backs that's most likely to get to have a shot to get there in his like ceiling scenario. The flip side is they just throw to Brown and Gronk a ton, right? And so he's not a huge part of it. I think there's two ways this game can play out. They could decide it without Evans and Godwin. They decide they're going to run a lot with Jones and really go back to that sort of, he's a pretty good rusher in a way that I think they see that. Or you go back to early last year when he was sort of their guy. He had 100 yards rushing in like 4 or 5 games or something. I haven't actually looked that up recently. I'm just doing that off memory, but I think it was 4 or 5 games for a stretch. 3 in a row. And then he had another one like 4 weeks later. So anyway, he certainly has the 100-yard rushing potential if they view him like they did at various points in 2020.
I think Rojo is an interesting one because of, I feel like I could be certainly wrong. He again, not going to be overlooked, right? No, everyone can clearly see Lenny and Gio are out. We like this offense, blah, blah, blah. He's cheap, projects well. I think he is the type of guy where we're in this meta world now where everybody thinks through these different GPP style takes, right? It used to just kind of be like, who projects the best, who looks the best, we stack them up, right? And you find the leverage really easily. Well, everybody's talking about the things we're talking about now. And Rojo is the type of a guy everybody sees, right? Week 1, he fumbles, bench, done, it's over, right? And ever since then, it's been the Leonard Fournette show. Obviously, Lenny did the thing, went down this Lombardi, Lenny down the stretch last week, and Rojo has been a very fragile player, right? He had against Green Bay last year, he had like the 98-yard touchdown. He has these crazy flashy, because he's a pretty good runner with the ball in his hands, but then he has the times where, and when you're with Tom Brady, you're not allowed to screw up. You're not allowed to drop the ball. You're not allowed to miss pass protections because he's, and so he's fragile, but everyone sees that, right? The matchup isn't pristine from a general game environment perspective. The Panthers defense is pretty good, and shout out to you for getting on that at the beginning of the season. I've been riding that wave, and then they get Stephon Gilmore, which is like, this defense is actually pretty talented. However, the way you attack this defense, in my opinion, I think you probably agree, is actually more so on the ground. And now you remove Godwin, you remove Evans. Like, we love AB, and I'm not going to say anything slanderous about AB in this spot, but like, their pass defense is like their strength, and their pass rush, the Panthers pass rush. Like, that's what they do. They bring pressure. They got elite cover dudes on the back end. So how do you beat that? You jam Rojo down their throat 20 plus times, and the Bucs can run the ball, right? I mean, Fournette is not a very good runner, and he's able to have some success in their run game. So I think Rojo is this interesting guy that like projects well. Everybody like probably likes him, but I'm not sure he's the guy that gets steamed. Like, Justin Jackson is like going to be crazy owned. I'm not sure Rojo. I think Rojo is the guy people are like, I think I'm okay leaving out Rojo, which makes me a little bit more interested in him. So I do want to lead that into Flores. Mark asked about power ranking these cheaper running backs. And so Justin Jackson, for me, I think we agree Justin Jackson is the number one. I think Rojo is actually my number 2, but I'm actually interested to kick it over to you and see kind of where you go after Justin Jackson. From let's see what value is sub 6K or something like that. And FanDuel is a little bit different too. I'll touch on that afterwards.
I mean, I'm seeing James Robinson kind of pop as the next one. I mean, it's obviously a very good spot against the Jets. At the same time, like the Jaguars can just fail overall offensively in a way that limits Robinson. I think I'd probably put Robinson second, but you touched on sort of the being a tier lower. Like there's paths to him failing. I would probably put Rojo third. There are paths to him failing. David Montgomery is a really nice price as well. Nick Foles is pretty immobile. I think we'll check down a decent amount, which should help Montgomery's receiving. At the same time, I think that Chicago-Seattle game is going to be slow. Both of those teams are comfortable being very slow. Matt, you're saying for value, so Mattison's obviously above this, but
I'm gonna exclude Mattison. He's a stud back on this slate at 6,800 or whatever.
Right. That's the way that I would probably rank the cheaper backs. You can get down into guys like Rex Burkhead projecting all right. I mean, I'm not going there. I just think it's a little bit challenging on this particular slate with all the other value we have to see Rex Burkhead and the Texans offense be hit enough of a ceiling to match some of the other guys that are priced around him. Running back is obviously the position where we can project volume a little more. I'm a little more willing to eat chalk typically, but that's how I'd rank the cheap ones. If I talked about some other potential values at running back. I think like Cordero Patterson's really interesting against the Lions. I think there's some other higher price guys that you can consider for sure.
Yeah. So I think Justin Jackson for me, for sure. I think I would actually go Rojo over James Robinson. And, if Evans and or Godwin or, some combination of their guys were in, maybe this would be a little bit clearer take, but in general, the James Robinson thing and the David Montgomery thing, their roles are amazing. And I think that they're pretty decent football players. Like they're above average NFL running backs. They have all the high value, everything that we want. Right. But in general, particularly on these really strong slates, like I ate the James Robinson chalk last week because I couldn't even find one other running back. Like he was like the only one. I'm like, I don't know who else to play this week. When we start to talk about, right, everybody projects well. There's a ton of good plays. We're going to touch on a couple more. The guys on the offenses that are just that bad, like the Jags are that bad. They played the Texans last week and they scored 1 touchdown. Like they are that bad. James Robinson was the same play this week as last week, and he scored 15 PPR points. Like I'm not saying he can't beat that. Of course he can, but like we're talking about an offense that the Bucks still without those wide receivers now bringing back AB. It's like they're going to score points even in bad matchups, and so I would rather default to those kind of guys than the Jets guys, the Jags guys, and the Bears are the same thing, right? Fields is out. And I'm not saying you have to like Justin Fields, but we're talking about Nick Foles led offense outdoors in the winter. It's nasty. That's the one game Roth talked about weather being a little bit of a concern. And like David Montgomery's role is great. He's actually a pretty good football player, but I just don't want to invest in those offenses on this particular slate.
Yep.
So I did want to touch on FanDuel. Pivot to the FanDuel is mainly at running back. Pretty much everywhere else, it's fairly fine. But these value guys that we're talking about on DraftKings are a little bit more muddied together, right? We talked about Justin Jackson, but everywhere, I do kind of like Burkhead a little bit. And to your point, now I'm pivoting to another conversation. But if I'm like stacking up the Chargers or something like that, I think Burkhead makes a reasonable enough, like in a deeper tournament play at running back. It's like if the Chargers really do put up a big score, or this game somehow stays competitive, like Burkhead, plays into what the Chargers want to give up, right? They just want you to be able to run. The Texans probably just want to run. I think he's a reasonable turn. He's very clearly not near the top of my priority list, but I think, in certain lineups, Rex Burkhead is a guy that does make some sense.
I think you can get a little bit of him. It's a little tougher at the FanDuel pricing. Obviously, Mattison is only $100 more there. I mean, I think that's a little bit more of, a pivot I can explain away on DraftKings with the gap in salary, but the $100 more, and then also he's the same price as Jackson and Jones. I think that ensures that Burkhead's not going to be, widely rostered and with all those other guys right there. But those other guys are, projecting quite a bit better. I think in quite a bit better spots. And so it's also hard to imagine a scenario where Burkhead outscores, basically all but one of them to be sort of a viable path to one of the top couple plays. I mean, I suppose he could be, you could play him with two of those guys. And I mean, that might be an interesting way. Go 3 running backs and actually play 2 of those other chalk plays and jam all of these running backs in this range. But then you only need one of them to fail. But there's, that's a cluster of salaries where those guys are all projecting to some of the best values on FanDuel.
And it's often a different game between the two sites, but we always find on these like value running back slates, I mean, we're talking about, these are not the same games we're playing. We're not gambling on the same sports here on FanDuel and DraftKings, right? Alexander Mattison is nearly min priced on FanDuel. He's like one of the most expensive running backs on DraftKings. So it's a very, very different game.
James Robinson on DraftKings.
Yep.
Robinson is the cheaper one, and Mattison is priced up on DraftKings.
Exactly. And so I think that's important to take into account for sure. Like Burkhead, I'm giving up, but I actually do think the like 3 super cheap running back thing on FanDuel is pretty fascinating this week, which we'll get into, given what we have at wide receiver. Like the firepower on this slate is all at wide receiver, and there is a ton of firepower at wide receiver. And so on FanDuel, those cheap running backs, like I said, I don't want to play Burkhead over Alexander Mattison or even some of these other guys, but I think those cheap running backs are pretty interesting on FanDuel. If you're playing on FanDuel, make sure to hop in the DFS OGs league. They have a week 16 contest up. You can go compete against 3 of literal legends in the DFS space. I know Noto. Noto's one of the guys on the DFS show. He filled in for me last week, and I appreciate you, Noto. If you're watching, you guys didn't give me the advice to win the live final, so I'm going to hold that against you for I don't know, maybe a year until next year. But Head Chopper, amazing. Beermakersfan, you guys probably watched the 6-pack right before this. Those 3 guys have a contest on FanDuel. So some of this stuff we're talking about here with FanDuel being super different, put it in that contest and maybe win some money. Other running backs, I wanted to touch on a couple before we move on to kind of games and wide receivers. Miles Sanders, I wanted to get your take on Miles Sanders because the Eagles' run game is just apparently the new Ravens. They just run all over everybody. Miles Sanders is, they had a short week, so he didn't practice. I think people were a little concerned by that, but I think it was just rest, right? They played on a Tuesday, so they were just getting him off his legs. And I know they have Jordan Howard there. Jordan Howard got plenty of work, but Miles Sanders was outrageously efficient. He is getting a little bit of work in the passing game. The matchup is great. He's kind of this guy, particularly on DraftKings, where he's in that same range as James Robinson, right? And now we're talking about a good offense with a good matchup as opposed to a crappy offense that James Robinson is on. What do you think about someone like Miles Sanders?
I think, he's a really interesting question. The entire discussion is about his ceiling, because from a projection and points per dollar standpoint, he looks fine to jam in and ownership and all of that looks fine. The question is, I always talk about the high value touches, the receptions and the goal line work. He's not getting a lot of receptions on a team that runs so much and tends, when they throw more vertically. Otherwise, Hurts is probably going to scramble or something. We know the scrambling quarterbacks don't dump off to the backs a ton. And then he's also not getting a lot of goal line work because Hurts is rushing for so many touchdowns. He takes so much of that rushing touchdown equity. It's almost exactly like, the Cam Newton days. I think it's easier to understand with Newton because Newton's such a bigger back, but Hurts has all of these multiple rushing touchdown games. All of them, at least a few. I think he has 3 or 4 games now where he's had 2 rushing touchdowns. Sanders has 0 all year. And we know that. We know that's not a certainty to keep up. The question I would ask is like, what % outcome do you think it is for Sanders to get the 100 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns? Because I can see that with Ronald Jones. I can see that with some of these other guys. For Sanders, for me, it feels like it's not even a top 1% outcome. It feels like it's a top 0.5% outcome. Like for him to get multiple touchdowns, it's hard enough for me to even see him get to the 1 TD. Obviously, like trends like this don't stay forever. There's a possibility that they're like, we want to get him a TD. Everyone's talking about it constantly, and they're like actually trying to use him a little bit more. They did last week, use him down and close, but he just got stuffed, and then they went to Hurts the very next play. But the multi-touchdown upside is the thing that I would want from a guy like him who's not catching a ton of passes, and we're relying on rushing efficiency a little, and it's so hard to see that for him there. So it's all a question of ceiling. How much do you buy into the fact that he can be a 100-yard 2-touchdown guy. I think there's enough like negative trends there that like I'm not going there in DFS right now.
Yep. I think that makes total sense. One natural pivot from that, where a guy that probably does have that type of upside that you mentioned earlier, Ramondre Stevenson being out, is Damian Harris at literally the exact same price on DraftKings, and I think they're really close on FanDuel. We've gotten some questions about Damian. I think people are getting a little bit excited for Damian, and when you look like at our ownership projections, particularly on DraftKings, where he's not a real pass catcher. He might, without Ramondre, he might catch a couple of balls, right? But he's not project. He could do the Jonathan Taylor yesterday and get like 1 or 2 targets and never catch a ball. However, we know what we get with this rushing offense. We saw him in this matchup in the freaking wind and snow and everything have a big game last week. How are you thinking about Damian Harris, particularly in regards to kind of the context you applied around Miles?
Yeah, I think it's a lot easier to see him get multiple touchdowns, right? I mean, you mentioned it when they played at Buffalo and it was super windy. Patriots only threw 3 times. I don't think that's going to happen today. I mean, there's only been a couple games all year where a team has thrown fewer than 15 times. They threw 3 times, so it's just insane. But this is a close spread, right? It's expected to be sort of a lower scoring game. The fact that the Bills have Moss active to me indicates that the Bills might run a little bit more too. Moss has been sort of their guy that they have up when they want to run the ball, basically. Breida gives them a little bit more, a little bit more flexibility when they're going to go very pass heavy, or they tend to lean more on Singletary in those situations when they're very, very pass heavy. Mm-hmm. But this could wind up being a run heavy game. Basically, what I was going to say is if the Patriots win this game, you're basically playing the Patriots to win. If they win this game, you can definitely see pass to Damian Harris being the reason why. Like they're running the ball effectively. The Bills are a tough defense, obviously. But if Harris is able to, run effectively, we know Belichick will just keep giving him the ball, especially in this matchup. He's very much a proponent of it's December football in the Northeast. We're going to try to control the game. And with Stevenson out, definitely expect Harris to get a lot of work. And he's been a good, an efficient runner all year. And so it's very similar to the Sanders play, except I feel like the multi-touchdown upside is a lot easier to see. I was saying 0.5% or whatever for Sanders. It's maybe 1.5%, and that sounds like a small difference, but you're talking about 3 times the potential. Yeah, exactly. Yep. So I think Harris has the better path to that multi-touchdown ceiling for sure.
And I think, this running back slate, we're talking about the running backs because I think it's pretty important to touch on some of these, lower owned guys. We'll get to wide receiver and even quarterback, and you'll see pretty quickly that you're going to be giving up a lot to go too far off the beaten path. There's definitely ways to approach it, but it's kind of a weird slate like that. But at running back, there are, it's so touchdown dependent, right? That's DFS in general, but at running back, it's like, did you get the 1 yard goal line touch, right? You talk about Miles Sanders. He scored 19 fantasy points. He's inches away, from almost a 30-point game, but he didn't get touchdowns. And so, and that's what we're talking about. You need those touchdowns at running back because we don't have Christian McCaffrey anymore. Alexander Mattison, I guess, is probably the one guy, in that role in a good offense. Maybe James Robinson is in that role, but in the worst offense in the NFL. Those guys don't exist anymore. So you need, when you're touching on that touchdown upside, you have to have that. Yeah, you need those touchdowns because you can't. Christian McCaffrey used to score 40 fantasy points. Sometimes he might not even score a touchdown, and those guys don't exist anymore. So it's important, I think, to discuss some of these guys. So let's pivot over. We're gonna go back to the Chargers now because they're not the premium spot on this slate, but I did want to touch on what's also interesting for Justin Jackson in turn becomes interesting for the Chargers passing game and can lead into also some of the value and the superstar wide receivers, which I think is where outside of AB, everybody is going to go today. Mike Williams got placed on the COVID list yesterday, which is kind of in turn good for Justin Jackson as well, right? So now they're without Austin Eckler and Mike Williams. This is borderline 3-man offense has been all year, right? And so now we took 2 of them away. Josh Palmer is 3,300 and projecting as our best point per dollar value at wide receiver on DraftKings. It also makes Keenan Allen a little bit more interesting, right? You've been a proponent. I made some good coin off of you earlier in the season. Keenan Allen receptions prop.
Yeah.
About because the guy just draws so many targets and he's set up for that today. And Josh Palmer has flashed a little bit. How are you thinking about those guys as it comes to tournaments when you already like Justin Jackson?
Yeah, you said it's not really the premium spot. It certainly isn't because there's such big favorites, but they're going to score points. They also have the highest implied team total. So we do know that it's hard for me to see the Chargers offense against the Texans not put up points. And so I think you do probably want, especially with the value here, Palmer being the clear value at the receiver position, you do probably want some type of exposure to the Chargers when you're building lineups. You can certainly go away from that. There's enough other ways to play this slate, but that is, as far as the teams that I'm looking at, and I'm like, I probably want a guy from that offense in my lineup somewhere. There's just so much value there between Jackson and Palmer, and such a high likelihood that they score some points. It's either one of those guys hits, or if they don't hit, it means Keenan Allen hit, like you said. Like, then that means Keenan Allen probably had 15 targets and had a monster game. The other guy, Jared Cook, I've seen mentioned a little bit. Donald Parham is out, or I believe he's out, right? He had the concussion last week. I saw a little bit of conversation about Cook. My issue with that was, last year for the Saints, Cook was basically used as a part-time player, 50%-ish snaps, never really got really high up there. He's an old tight end. This year, he's been basically used the same way. Parham went out like first snap last week, got that pretty scary concussion, and Cook didn't rise in terms of playing time. Steven Anderson and Trey McKitty, their other tight ends, played a good amount. Cook basically is just a part-time tight end. I don't think the Parham absence really elevates Cook's like routes potential and the potential for him to have like a big target game. So it really is, it becomes Palmer, I think. It could be, I don't even know who else they have active, to be honest. Do they have KJ Hill up or somebody? But it could be somebody that we're not talking about right now, because Guyton is out as well. Yeah. I think Palmer makes a lot of sense, or else if you're not playing either Palmer or Jackson, I agree with you. I think it makes a lot of sense to go up to Keenan Allen, because then I think you're playing it as he's going to have double-digit targets and be a stud this week as well.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the Chargers because even though, Justin Jackson is obviously the chalk, but I think they're actually the decision point on the slate. And I tend to agree. I find it really hard to not have a Charger in basically every lineup. And that was kind of where I was heading, is like you have two guys, a $4,200 running back and a $3,300 wide receiver that project as basically the best values on the slate, given, right? And the Jalen Guyton thing seems silly, like who cares about Jalen Guyton? But it's like Josh Palmer might play 100% of snaps, unless they go to a 3 tight end look where it's only Keenan out there at wide receiver or something. Josh Palmer might, and I think he's a good enough football player. I did the ownership report with Jamino the other day, and he's a big Josh Palmer stan, so he's probably really excited today to jam 100% Josh Palmer. But it's like we're talking about a guy who may not leave the field against the Texans at 3,300 on one of the best offenses in the league. I know I would expect Mike Williams.
He played a ton when
Keenan was out, right?
Keenan was out a couple of weeks ago, exactly. So I think you're absolutely right. I think he plays an absolute ton. I think he doesn't leave the field. KJ Hill's not even on the roster anymore. I was just pulling up the roster. The other dudes on the roster have not played. I mean, I genuinely because they have Guyton out, Williams out, and Andre Roberts, who's been their kick returner, is also on the COVID list. It's actually interesting to look at their depth chart. Their defense is really ravaged by COVID as well. That's something I kind of missed. That's probably why Burkhead is projecting a little bit better in some of these spots. But they're missing like 8 guys on defense, not all starters, like 3 starters, but Bose is out. So that's, I believe he's out. I mean, I'm seeing on our lads. I mean, it's so freaking hard to keep track of these COVIDs, man.
There's it's hard to keep track of who's getting ruled out during the week. And then we're sitting here live on the air. Not that I'm not asking for sympathy, but I'm saying like you're trying to keep, okay, Swift is out. We didn't know Swift was going to play. Yeah, and you're like, who's out with COVID? Yeah, Jalen Guyton's out with COVID. Oh, Andre Roberts is out with COVID. It is a disaster. But I think that's important, particularly for the Chargers. I thought they were a really big talking point because of that. They don't have anyone else, and they are playing the Texans. And it's not like Justin Herbert is out. Justin Herbert is still in. So I think they're a huge, when you go to make your lineups, like I'm not saying, everybody has different kind of takes to how they play GPPs. Ben and I are a little bit more smaller field focused. And I find it very difficult in smaller fields to basically leave without one of the Chargers in your lineup. Somebody in chat was mentioning Jared Cook, and I agree with Ben's take on Jared Cook, but I mean, Jared Cook can have a good game too, and tight end is a little bit of a wasteland. So if you want to make him your Charger, he is kind of leverage off of those other guys. So I support that as well. I also think the last thing on the Chargers, and we can quit talking about Chargers Texans, move on to some of the juicy games on the slate. I think you can like onslaught this Chargers team. you have a team with basically all the best values on the slate, and then a really good high upside and high floor quarterback against the Texans. It's like, if he throws 4 touchdowns and one of them happens to go to Justin Jackson, right? We're talking about his passing game role. It's like, you just got all the smash values, and everybody's cheap. Even Keenan Allen is like a totally fine price. Like, and you just got this absolute.
When you say onslaught, you mean Herbert, Jackson, Palmer, Allen? Are you including Cook in that or no?
Just 4. I would just do 4, but including Justin Jackson, right? And so, like, you're obviously playing for the, like screen pass touchdown or whatever to Justin Jackson. But I mean, we've seen Eckler do that plenty of times, right? And you don't even need that. He could run for a touchdown and they could score 45 points against the Texans. So I think on slates like this, where there's so many good projections we were talking about earlier, you have to be smart about your lineups. It's actually much more difficult to kind of like onslaught games and onslaught teams versus like last week where nobody projected well. It's like, just pick a game, onslaught it, and you're probably going to get all the points. This week it's a little tougher, but I think the Chargers are the one spot that I'm actually looking to do that a little bit. So the other game, there are other games on this slate. I know we talked about the Chargers a lot, but the game that kind of people are talking about the most, and rightfully so, is Rams Vikings. Matthew Stafford, particularly on DraftKings, is extremely cheap. Cooper Kupp apparently just scores 30 to 35 fantasy points every single week, right? Obviously Robert Woods is out. They activated Cam Akers out of a really kind of a cool thing. He in order to get his pension, he needed to be activated this week, despite definitely not being ready to play. So I thought, just a shout out to the Rams, even though they ripped my heart out when they moved from St. Louis. But so you have Odell Beckham, right? Tyler Higbee is back. And then on the other side, you have Alexander Mattison, one of the best running back plays on the slate, and Justin Jefferson, one of the best, in my opinion, wide receiver plays on the slate. What are you doing with this game? Is this a game you're definitely, targeting for stacks, or how are you approaching this one?
Yeah, I mean, this is the one we had to get to for sure in terms of, looking at the game totals on this slate, looking at the fact that, there's only 3 that are even at 45. The majority of the slate, you're looking at low 40s game total. This one's got a 48.5. It looks like a September game total. We know these offenses can be very concentrated. They're both, the Rams passing game, obviously, and the Vikings passing game, obviously. We do have Thielen back. Don't think that takes any, issue or any concern away from Justin Jefferson's ceiling. He can still hit it because of how concentrated this offense is. It's arguably, potentially, but arguably better for Justin Jefferson to have Thielen out there. Maybe that's not entirely true because Jefferson has been getting target shares up over 40% a couple of weeks recently, but Thielen at least draws some coverage. You're probably going to see a decent amount of Ramsey, but Justin Jefferson is playing and getting open better than almost any receiver in the league. I think better than any receiver in the league. I mean, you can throw
him and Devontae, right? It's just him and Devontae are the best two at getting open.
And Devontae, a lot of it is just timing and everything, and Rodgers throwing him open. Jefferson is open every single time Cousins throws to him. He's like 5 yards separated from everybody. It's insane. But yeah, so Ramsey is a slight concern, but it's not a reason to get off Justin Jefferson the way that he's running routes right now. Obviously Kupp, ceiling every single week. At the same time, his price is high enough that, like, if he does have a normal game at some point, he's probably not the smash, especially on this slate with a lot of value. At this price, you do still need the 10 catches and probably the multiple touchdowns. Problem is, he does that every single week. So I mean, I think you can certainly tell yourself that he can do that this week again. I like Michelle in terms of the backs for the Rams. I think everyone is sort of on the same standpoint there. Their routes were there was nothing like indicating role there. It was just like Michelle was playing more and he was doing everything. He was running enough routes and everything. So obviously Mattison is a great value on the Viking side for their backs. So these are concentrated offenses. We know where the volume is going to go. It's a good high total. It's definitely a game you want to be looking at. It's also going to be massively owned, so you got to do it creatively.
One thing I'm glad you talked about Justin Jefferson, because there's a lot of guys that are going to be owned in this game, but Justin Jefferson is largely competing with that Cooper Kupp ownership at the top, right? He's competing with Keenan Allen ownership, and now he's competing with Tyreek Hill. Now that Tyreek is back and Kelsey is out, like, he's competing with all these superstars. He's somewhat competing with Alexander Mattison on his own team's ownership, right? If you're going to spend up at that one running back spot and you're going to play Cooper Kupp, which a lot of people are going to do, it's like you start to run out of salary and spots for Justin Jefferson. So he's this fascinating guy. And I feel like on some of the PPR, we get these wide receivers just You're never going to, and everybody loves to play Justin Jefferson now, which is funny. Like when we first started the show at the beginning of the year, nobody cared about Justin Jefferson. All of a sudden it was like week 5 or 6, people realized how good Justin Jefferson was. And he's like such a smash bring back on every stack, right? The Vikings defense isn't very good. So it's like, oh yeah, I'll just play Justin Jefferson. He's awesome. He can score 40 points every week. So he's coming in with enough ownership, but I think we see on some of the sites like FanDuel and Yahoo, where he doesn't get quite as much ownership. And it's also not quite as much like correlated ownership, right? You're playing Cup, you Jefferson as your bring back and blah, blah, blah. You make it work. So I think maybe Yahoo might be one of my favorite sites to use Justin Jefferson this week. So make sure to go over to Yahoo, use promo code Grinders25, and you'll get a free $25 on your first deposit. And again, we're talking about bouncing back and forth between sites and everything, but I think these slates later in the year, some of the sites like Yahoo are really, really good places to play, because honestly, if you made it to week 16 and you're still making money in NFL DFS on DraftKings, you're probably just good at the game, like, because it is really hard. It is a really efficient market, and it is very tough. So if you go to a place like Yahoo, or you go over to a place like Thrive Fantasy, we have a free roll for everybody. So, you don't have to have a bunch of money on there like you have to on DraftKings. And Chief, who is our prop shop guy, crushing it on these sites like Thrive Fantasy and Prize Picks. We have a week 16 free roll for a chance at RG Premium. So any new user, you get 100% deposit bonus up to $250 and a free $20 contest ticket on Thrive Fantasy if you use promo code Grinders25. So those sites, I do think it's important to kind of mention some of those sites, because we do focus a little bit more on DraftKings here, but there's a lot of great ways that are maybe a little bit simpler actually to make money on those sites. And Justin Jefferson always sticks out for me as an example, like on those sites. Like he just comes with 10% ownership on DraftKings because everybody's like kind of good at what they're doing. And that's not always the case on some of these other sites. So, all right, we got to talk about, because I'm on the show now, we have to talk about one gross game. I think I'm contractually obligated to talk about a gross game, but there are some good projections in this gross game. Jets, Jags. We talked about James Robinson a little bit, is one of the best projecting running backs, and we have a bunch of decent values in this game. Whether it's Jamison Crowder is out, Elijah Moore is out, Laviska Shenault is out. There's a lot of guys kind of spread across this game that are actually decent values that I do like a fair bit, but the game environment, as we know, is like absolutely putrid. Are you looking to any of these guys, or whether it's as one-offs or like secondary correlations, maybe with James Robinson or something, a Berrios, a Keelan Cole, James O'Shaughnessy, Laquan Treadwell getting his all of a sudden 10 targets a week? Are you using any of these guys as values, particularly like maybe as pivots off of a Josh Palmer or something?
I mean, I think you can. I think Cole and probably Mims are better locks to play. I mean, Berrios has been very good at drawing targets per route when he's out there. I think he's probably going to play a good amount and make some sense as well. It's maybe it's a leak for me, but right now, especially with the 2021 atmosphere, like I want good offenses. That's sort of I think one of the big takeaways that we probably should have had broadly from the 2021 season is like the dudes that have been tied to consistent offenses have been the most consistent in a season where nothing's been consistent.
Yeah,
it's tough for me, and there's probably going to be points in this game, but it's tough for me, man. This game could be 13-7. We have quarterbacks that are playing very poorly on both sides, and we have not exactly a lot of talent. But yeah, I would say like if you force me to pick a receiver in this game, it probably is Berrios. I'm not buying Laquan Treadwell. He's been seeing a ton of volume, but I just we have a pretty decent sized track record on him of him not being very good. So just a couple of decent games, not even like good ceiling games or anything like that, is not going to get me to suddenly buy into him. Berrios is a dude that from a targets per run perspective, which is a big stat that I've looked at the last few years and think is, very predictive of what we're looking for. He's been good at that and should be in line to run a few more routes this week. And so, if you want to play Robinson, bringing him back with Berrios, I think makes some sense. But it's also just, a spot you can definitely full fade this game.
Yep. I totally agree. I think Berrios would be my favorite guy, and I agree. I think he makes sense, like as a bring back to a James Robinson. If you absolutely want to punt tight end and maybe get away from some of the like injury news, I think O'Shaughnessy is okay. There's a couple other values at wide receiver I want to talk about, and then we definitely got to talk about those high end guys. There's a Cooper Kupp question, and there's a lot to talk about amongst the superstar wide receivers, even some we haven't touched on yet. We talked about Palmer, so we talked about Berrios, we talked about AB. I really feel like if you need us to touch on Antonio Brown without Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, I mean, I guess you pipe up in the chat, but there's really not a whole lot to say. The matchup is fairly difficult, but I really don't think matchups matter for this given situation in this particular offense.
Targets per out run again. I mean, and he's not even run a ton of routes typically when he's active, but I think his routes will probably be, I mean, we don't know if he's fully healthy, but certainly from a ceiling perspective, his routes could be higher than they've been because they need somebody to run routes, and he draws a lot of targets.
Yep. And yeah, I just don't think it matters with, we've seen that plenty of times, right? People will talk about like the Saints, and the Saints do have like somewhat had the Bucs number, and Mike Evans still catches a touchdown every week. And Chris Godwin has one of his biggest games this entire season was against the Saints, and the Bucs are just that good on offense. And honestly, AB is still pretty much that good. So I'm not worried. The only thing to talk about AB is ownership. He's going to be extremely chalky. And then like, if you're not playing any Panthers and you're playing a one-off Antonio Brown, I guess you can do the Brady, AB, Gronk thing and bring it back with a DJ Moore or a Robbie Anderson or something. I think that's mildly interesting, but and definitely going to be a low owned way to go at that, right? You play DJ Moore as or Robbie as a bring back to your Brady stack.
Gronk's a really interesting way to play that, because I don't think he's going to be as astronomically owned. It doesn't project as a great value, but he could get, I mean, especially if AB's not like fully healthy. I mean, I don't know. Fully up to speed or whatever. And it is a Ronald Jones game a little bit, and then Gronk out targets him. I think there are paths to that, and that's probably the way that Brown fails or doesn't, smash at least. And so Gronk is certainly an interesting one as a guy who, from a projection standpoint, doesn't look great at his high salary, but I think makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like they're not going to move the ball, and it's not like they're not going to score.
Yeah.
So if it isn't AB and it isn't Rojo, I mean, God bless Rashad
Tyler Johnson is the other option, and that would be, I would go there before I'd go to like the Jets and Jags receivers. As far as like cheap pivots off like Palmer, I like the Tyler Johnson play.
Yep. I think Tyler Johnson can play a little bit too, like real life football. Just looking really quick at some of our point per dollar projections. God, we are definitely in week 16 when we scroll through some of this. Keelan Cole, we already talked about. I guess this one is a fairly decent one. We didn't talk about the Bills yet. Cole Beasley and Gabe Davis both got placed on the COVID list, yesterday or Friday or whatever it was. I can't keep track of all these guys. They are out today. And so Emmanuel Sanders is in and back, but Isaiah McKenzie is also projecting like a pretty good value. Obviously, they have Stephon Diggs and Dawson Knox. The matchup is not ideal, but Isaiah McKenzie is 3K and Manny Sanders is 4K. We also talked about Damian Harris like as a interesting running back play. Are you interested in all in these like ancillary Bills guys despite the matchup?
I mean, I think Sanders certainly has some air yards. The question with guys like this is like, do they have the ceiling again? I mean, and this goes back to like the Keelan Cole and that stuff from a base projection standpoint. We have to project their routes and targets to go somewhere that looks solid. What's the ceiling projection look like? And so like, Jets, Jags guys, that's my concern. That's my concern with Keelan Cole. Here, I think Emmanuel Sanders can certainly hit for from an air yards perspective, can hit for a long plays, can hit for a long touchdown. Gabe Davis basically took over his role the last couple of weeks. Davis had a near miss on a long touchdown last week, but then he ended up getting a short couple touchdowns in the red zone. I do think probably though, like the answer here is, very potentially is just Diggs, like play Diggs or play Knox, right? Because Knox is a guy whose role has overlapped with Davis and Sanders and these guys where he's getting air yards. And a big part of Gabe Davis's role has been the red zone targets. Another guy who gets a decent amount of red zone targets is Dawson Knox. And so he's, the ceiling for a guy like McKenzie, like I think McKenzie's interesting. Certainly this is a good team, but the ceiling for him is a little tougher for me to see. He does have, late last year, he had a 3 touchdown game or something, right? But I don't know that he has, that in his range of outcomes enough for me to want to put him in.
No, I don't think in this one. I kind of like Isaiah McKenzie a little bit as a player, and I've seen people cite I think it was week 17 too, that he had a return touchdown, and they're sitting guys. So maybe next week for Isaiah McKenzie, because I think those guys are going to be out again. One last value, and then I want to hit on, we can briefly run through tight ends. I do want to hit on those superstar wide receivers because I think people are kind of interested in how to handle Kupp, especially versus those other guys. Nico Collins as a run back to your charge. Are you at all interested, without Brandon Cooks, are you at all interested in, he's projecting like a good value too?
Yeah, he's sort of been their second most consistent player in terms of routes and volume. And so as a bring back, I think he can make a little bit of sense. It's probably him or Burkhead. I mean, I think you could probably go down to Brevin Jordan, their rookie tight end, because he's min, but he's not running a full slate of routes. So he's a guy that's like, got to hit on a touchdown and have a role change as well. It's tough. It's tough sledding there.
I do kind of like someone like him as a theoretical play, right? Young guy on a clearly tanking team. We're playing in DFS, right? I'm sacrificing a tight end position, which is not very strong. And if I don't get the roll growth, hope he gets 2 for 30 and a touchdown. If I do get the roll growth, it's like, okay, he's probably the clear bring back on this, given the positional stuff. So I think people like him are a little bit interesting.
Fits really well with the Chargers. I mean, clear, that is a clear only as a correlation play. We need the Chargers offense to have to score 40. And if they have to score 40, it probably requires the Texans to at least get a couple touchdowns.
Yep, exactly. So perfect lead into tight end. Got it as growth. This is the one position when you click point per dollar, or even you click raw points, and it's really bad. Obviously, Travis Kelce is out for the Chiefs. Darren Waller is out for the Raiders. Mark Andrews has been absolutely smashing and is now playing with Josh Johnson at quarterback, which we didn't touch on. And I'll just run through it really quick because I know we got to get out of here in just a couple of minutes. Somebody asked about Josh Johnson. He's projecting for some ownership, and everybody has different opinions on how you should approach the position. How Ben has hit on every single one of these other positions is how I feel about Josh Johnson. You are going to need raw points to win today, even from your value guys, because the value guys are true, real good play. Like Justin Jackson can go score 25 plus fantasy points today, right? These value guys, Josh Palmer can have 100 yards and a touchdown today. Josh Johnson in a at best neutral matchup, at best. I know Huntley went off last week, but even Lamar has not been having monster weeks and Josh Johnson now comes off the street, basically not practicing. It's just a guy that I think is going to be over-owned. It's not that you can't play him, right? But the game we're playing is figuring out how owned a guy should be, right? Just because you're 10% doesn't mean you're a good or a bad play. It's should you be 5% or should you be 30%, right? And I think he's just going to, because he's 4K, people are going to play him because it's I look what I can get when I jam this 4K guy in.
And because Huntley played so well. And it's a different player. It doesn't mean he immediately.
Not even close. Yeah. They're not even close to the same player. And so that's one stand I definitely am. I'm not personally interested in Josh Johnson. So to wrap up tight end, and then we'll hit these wide receivers. Cole Kmet is kind of like the David Montgomery of tight ends. His role is great. He is going to get volume, but it's when the hell is Cole Kmet ever going to win you a tournament? Now Nick Foles is in there. At his ownership,
Jimmy Graham end zone targets does not help. It's kind of like the Miles Sanders of tight ends as well. Yeah,
it really is. Every single week, you mentioned Jared Cook. I do think the first guy on the point per dollar list that actually is kind of interesting to me is Foster Moreau. We had the Foster Moreau week a few weeks ago where everybody was like, "Oh, you got to jam him. He's Darren Waller. He's 95% Darren Waller." And it's we learned really quickly he is not. But now everybody's off that thing. Foster Moreau is completely unowned on a really gross tight end slate, and so I think it's kind of one of those flop lag situations. I actually like Foster Moreau quite a bit. If I'm spending up, you have Dallas Goedert, who's going to be fairly popular, and I have concerns about their run pass rate. Kyle Pitts is my guy. I'm going to play a little bit of Kyle Pitts. We don't need to talk about it anymore because he's probably still not going to catch a touchdown. But the last thing is there's a couple guys in the Chiefs game. Do you have a take on, with Travis Kelce out and with Freiermuth also out, on any of the tight ends in that, or is it just too much of a mess?
I don't have a strong take. I mean, if I was forced, it would be Gentry. I don't know what Casey's going to do, honestly. I mean, they have Noah Gray, the rookie. They haven't used him a ton. I think they'll probably use a couple different tight ends. They'll use, maybe Blake Bell a little bit or whatever.
Yeah.
I wouldn't play a Chiefs tight end personally. I mean, it's very possible one scores a touchdown, but I don't think the ceiling potential is there. Gentry seems like he's the likely tight end for the Steelers, but I don't love the spot for either of them. It is a gross position though, man. It might only take 12 points this week to get there.
If your tight end catches a touchdown this week, you're probably pretty darn happy. So I do like punting a little bit, even though I like the Pitts and the Goddards and Moreau, whatever. He's a punt, I guess. So 2 things before we wrap up. One, these elite wide receivers. How do I choose between Cooper Kupp, Tyreek Hill without Travis Kelce, Justin Jefferson, Keenan Allen, even like the Bengals guys look really good. How are you looking at those superstar wide receivers?
I mean, I'm trying to get some exposure to each, and I'm playing different correlations, right? So, I mean, it's tough. I'm not going to play a lot of Kupp because I was talking about his price being so high, and I think people are going to be able to overplay him because of the value.
Yep.
The path for that hitting is, he has to really have yet another ceiling game, and he very well might. He continues to do that every single day. But I'm not super on him, although I do think he's a very strong play. I always want to play Jefferson, but I guess I'm just preferring Jefferson to Kupp is sort of the way that path, that plays out for me. I mean, you look at Fanduel, we're talking about the cheap running backs. There's going to be people that are going to play that as a mini correlation and be able to fit both of them and fit multiple other, high priced receivers. Hill makes sense. Diggs is the one that's probably going to come in a little bit low ownership relative to his potential ceiling, especially with, Beasley out, with Gabe Davis out. There's this potential for Diggs to have a monster game. He had a monster game in week 16 against the Patriots last year, 3 touchdowns. And so, we haven't seen the ceiling from Diggs, but I think he's like probably my favorite combination of ownership and ceiling at the, in the high priced receiver range. But like ultimately it's like receivers are volatile. All of these guys project well for a reason. I mean, it's kind of like correlate, play smart. How are you going to play your lineups? I don't have like any strong negative opinions on a lot of these receivers. They're good. And we know that.
Yeah, same. That's exactly how I feel. I don't have really somebody asked about, should I jam Cooper Kupp into all my teams? I think if I had a take on these guys, it would actually be the opposite of that. If I'm really going to make a stand against one of these guys, I think Cooper Kupp is the only guy you can leverage, like with someone like Odell. If you really want to get crazy with Sony Michel, tight end's horrible, play Tyler Higbee, whatever. He's the only guy. Like, who are you playing to leverage Tyreek? Hardman, no, you're not playing those guys. Justin Jefferson, Thielen, Mattison isn't leveraged.
You're probably just playing the Chiefs to be like their 20-point offense, which they've been.
Yep. So Cooper Kupp's the only guy that I can actually leverage, I think. And so Odell is actually, I'm going to pivot this over to some conviction plays. Odell Beckham is actually one of my we didn't talk a lot about him this week, but I think everything lines up for Odell at a great price point, a little bit more than AB, right? He kind of just fits everything you want as a tournament, but he's been awesome for the Rams. Cooper Kupp, everybody's going to spend up $9,100 for Cooper Kupp. I can get $5,300 for Odell, and I don't have anything negative to say about Cooper Kupp, but if the touchdowns just don't swing his way and maybe they swing to Odell's way, you have a low owned, GPP winner at 5,300. The only other guy I wanted to mention that really started sticking out as we were doing the show, the Bucks look great, right? And when I in anything I do in lineup HQ, I sort by ownership, I sort by point per dollar, I sort by raw points. The guy who pops as like low owned, projects well is DJ Moore. Yeah. So this is going to be a Gretch week. It's a DJ Moore week.
I have him in all of my high stakes lineups that I'm like more focused on this week. Season long lineups. I am massively exposed to DJ Moore right now in season long. So I think he does pop, but I'm not getting him into lineups for that reason. I'm like, I might mix in some DJ Moore. Before we wrap up, we need a Gretch conviction play so we can pass it over to the crunch time guys. Don't even have any like clear great conviction plays. I will say Justin Jackson. I do think he plays a good amount. I'll say that, at his price, especially on DK with the receptions, that he's good job.
Perfect. All right. DJ Moore, Odell Beckham leverage, and make sure to jam in Justin Jackson and be back. These are much better takes than when we were Zach Wilson discussing a few weeks ago. But that wraps us up. Sorry for running a little bit late, producer Devin and the crunch time guys. We will be back in week 17 as the season is winding down here. Everybody enjoy. Hopefully you had a happy holidays and enjoy your tournaments this week in week 16. See you next week.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of NFL Crunch Time. And I do so many shows, and sometimes I forget which one we're on. But it's been that kind of week with all the NFL late breaking news. I got a different cast with me today. I have the Iceman, Keith Eyster, who probably loves me calling him that every Sunday. What's up, Iceman? How's it going?
Another fun NFL slate, all kinds of news, all kinds of value, lots of different ways, lots of good chalk, I think. So tournaments are interesting this week for sure.
Here's Brit Devine, 2 shows in a row, 2 weeks in a row. It's a pleasure to be back with you, my friend. Thanks for filling in today.
What's up, man? The cash game guru is here to give you the same lineup everyone else is going to be playing today.
Well, I think that's probably profitable most times than not. If we had a crystal ball and we could predict what's everyone going to play for cash, I think we'd be all right if it hits. So thanks for hopping in here. And of course, we got Devin working the boards as usual. And best of luck to everyone in season-long leagues. I've been about on the good and bad side of the 50-yard line and about every news that broke. I have some Austin Eckler. I'm against some Austin Eckler. I have Kelsey in one league. I don't have Kelsey in another. So, best of luck. I hope the waiver wires are still open in the leagues that you're in, because if they're not, you're probably toast in some of your semifinals. I'll drop some plugs momentarily here. I talk about the same promos every week. That's because they're really good. So, of course, first of all, we moved our live chat to the Discord. We're no longer on YouTube. Check out the live stream Discord channel. I know some of you have been popping in, and some of our loyal listeners and the regulars, and we appreciate you, and thanks for interacting and asking questions. You can find Devin give some hot takes in the Discord as well. The interception showdown king himself has been calling plenty of pick sixes and interceptions for primetime showdown. The DFS OGs League, if you're playing on Fanduel this week, sign up for the DFS OGs Fanduel contest for NFL Week 16. Compete against our guys like Beer, Chop, Noto, and the link for that is fanduel.com/OGs show. BetMGM, get on over there, use the bonus code GRINDERSBET. Bet $10 to get $200 instantly when your team scores a touchdown.
Bet the Rams -3.
Oh, and he's coming in hot. The cash game guru. Rams -3.
Lock of the week.
Lock of the week. Man, I love it. Hot takes. And if you don't, if you bet the Rams -3 over there, then go on over there to Yahoo and get some more action. Grinders 25 is the $25 bonus on your first deposit on Yahoo. That's Grinders 25 with a capital G. Bet the Rams -3. It's like we're rhyming here. Everything is awesome. And we'll go position by position here. 12:35 Eastern. And towards the tail end of the show, we will get to your questions. So Keith's going to do tournament takes, and my dog almost took down my green screen. Merry Christmas to everybody. And Brit's going to give us some cash plays. So let's start with the cash side of things first, Brit, if that's okay with you. I'm sure there's a couple of quarterbacks that are sticking out for price and ownership more than others. So who are the first 1 or 2 guys you're looking at locking in for cash games?
I think, though, the one guy everyone's on this week has to be Jalen Hurts on both sites. He's a little underpriced, has that rushing upside. He is their goal line back. He's got 10 rushing touchdowns on the year. Miles Sanders has none. So that's pretty obvious what they're doing once they get inside the goal line there. And he can hit Dallas Goedert and Devonta Smith if needed to in this game. If you're worried at all, right? So that, if they just run the ball for 400 yards, right, against the Giants, I think that's pretty reasonable expectation with some, with Howard and Sanders and the Giants basically giving up on the season. You can spend up. The other guy would be Justin Herbert, in my opinion, who should just absolutely dice up Houston, even without Mike Williams and Austin Eckler. I'm not expecting him to not have a great game. But price, even though we have all this value, does matter. I'm leaning Hurts on both sides to anchor the cash teams.
That's a crazy Miles Sanders statistic, one that I didn't even realize. I mean, geez, squeaky wheel week 16, whatever week it is for Miles Sanders. Herbert is projected to carry a good amount of ownership, highest projected owned quarterback right now on DK. Matthew Stafford right behind him. And it's officially puke week when Josh Johnson is here at 10% at 4K. I understand, but are you considering Josh Johnson whatsoever for cash, Brit? Just give it to me.
No, I don't think you need to do that. He's coming in, didn't really know the system too much. And if we didn't have all this running back value, and I think there's some defensive value, and I think there's some tight end value, I think you could maybe do it, but there's just really no need for me in this. We don't have Christian McCaffrey We've got Cooper Kupp and we've got Tyreek Hill, right? But you still can get all those guys in your lineup without having to go to a guy like Josh Johnson on cash teams today.
Okay, makes sense. And I know you touted Rams -3 from the rip, and Matt Stafford has a couple of conviction tags on our HQ and is garnering some good ownership. Matt Stafford still provide a high floor, decent price tag.
Yeah, got no problem with him. I think he's fine. Herbert's the other one. I'm really eyeing in on Hurts. I just think the rushing floor, the touchdown upside, you give him 150 passing yards, you give him, 2 total touchdowns, you give him 50 to 60 on the ground. I think that just plays out pretty well at his price today.
Nice team total for Philly, 26.25. And actually, Hurts's Vegas passing props across the industry are like in the 190s too. So that you're conservative on your projection there, which is awesome. That bodes well for Hurts and cash. Keith, are there any of these guys you're willing to overlap? Is it just kind of one of those weeks where find the receivers you like and plug in a quarterback? I mean, what are your thoughts for tournaments here?
Yeah, the 2 quarterbacks that are carrying ownership that I have a ton of interest in still are Justin Herbert and Matthew Stafford. I mean, we've seen big ceilings out of these guys. I think you have to have a little exposure to both because they can just produce big scores. Going off the board a little bit, I'm looking to get plenty of Joe Burrow today. That Baltimore secondary is really beat up. Great stacking options for Burrow there. Like him a good deal. This Minnesota Rams game is the fastest game of the week, my favorite game environment of the week. And Kirk Cousins is going to be very low owned. Gets Thielen back this week. I think Cousins is very much in play at that ownership. Tons of interest there. Getting a little bit more off the board, even Matt Ryan against this Detroit defense, I think you have to have some interest in. Don't love his weapons. Pitts has been okay, but can't find the end zone. I think I'm going to take some stabs on Matt Ryan today. I'm off of Josh Johnson for tournaments too. The price tag is really attractive, but there's plenty of value. I don't think that you need to mess with that today. So Cousins and Burrow are my 2 favorite tournament plays.
Kirk Cousins could get some leverage off some Alexander Mattison chalk. Is that kind of some of your thought process there on top of the high pace game?
Yeah, definitely. Brit loves the Rams to lead in this game as well. So maybe they turn a little bit pass heavy here. I mentioned getting Thielen back. If that lowers Justin Jefferson ownership, I'm all for that. Yes, please. I think Thielen can take a little bit of the attention off of Jefferson, and I still like Jefferson just as much. So game environment, leverage off of the chalk running back, definitely. I mean, tons of good things lining up for Kirk Cousins here.
All right. Sounds good. Like some of the calls there. Do you have any take on Josh Allen today, Keith?
Really low owned with a high ceiling. So I don't hate it. I like some of the other guys I mentioned better, but I'm not going to fault anyone that wants to play a guy that has that type of a ceiling.
Belichick owns that man's soul. So I would take a pass on that one. He's down too many weapons too also.
Yeah, I'm willing to give the Blizzard game a pass, I guess. But you're right. Other than that, it's been tough sledding for him. Good stuff. Like the breakdown here. Let's move over to running back because that'll be fun. It's Justin Jackson week, I guess. At that price and the potential workload and the matchup and the game script and the Vegas total, I don't know how many more boxes I have to check. I think I don't want to steal your thunder, Britt, but I have a feeling he's almost a free square for cash games. What are your thoughts on cash and Justin Jackson here at running back?
So it's the tale of 2 sites on cash games for running backs because Fanduel is like Alexander Mattison, we're going to make you free at 5,500, and Draftkings is like, well, we're going to give him to you at 6,800, and then Draftkings is like, Justin Jackson, you're free at 4,200, and Fanduel has him reasonably priced at like 5,400 or something, but then we've got Ronald Jones in there who's cheap too, and a couple other guys. So I like Justin Jackson for sure on DraftKings. Like he lets you get all the receivers that are going to get like 14 targets today, right? So he's sort of the key to unlocking that on DraftKings. On FanDuel, I currently don't have Jackson on my cash team because you've got Mattison at 5,500, you've got Jones at 5,400, and you've got Justin Jackson is 5,400 as well. So you're really at this point where do you want to play Ronald Jones or Justin Jackson? Who do you trust more? I don't know. Ronald Jones has been at least yards per carry has been pretty good this year when he's gotten the ball, and he's going to get the ball today against Carolina for sure, in my opinion. So on FanDuel, I think I like Ronald Jones just a little bit more. I wouldn't fault you for playing Justin Jackson, but I think I like Jones. You can't play Jackson over, say, a guy like David Montgomery, who is like a true every down bell cow, pass catching, all the run game. You got Snow in that game. I know they're an underdog, but he's going to get all the work 100% for sure in that game. He's just 6,600 on FanDuel, so I do like him. You could also go to Jackson if you wanted to go 3 cheap running backs. The problem is you have to spend your money somewhere. And I think I like Montgomery over a guy like Justin Jackson today in terms of overall amount of touches. On DraftKings, I mentioned Jackson. I'm finding myself like on Mattison, FanDuel, you got to have him. DraftKings, you cannot play Alexander Mattison. Don't forget his great games this year. 2 Lions, 1 Seattle, right? Not hard to have great games when you're getting all the touches against those. Today's against the Rams. And I personally think the game script's going to go against Minnesota pretty hard in this game. I think the Rams cruise to victory. That's just my take. That's why I like the bet. So I don't find myself having Mattison on my DraftKings cash team, mainly because we've got James Robinson at 5,900, right? FanDuel made him $1 bajillion. DraftKings is like, nah, he's 5,900. So that trio of like Jones, Jackson, and Robinson on FanDuel allows me to get all the wide receivers that are going to have all those targets. And that's what I really think is going to carry me to victory today. So it's just a little different between the 2 sites for me.
Victory Sunday. You got to love it. As a tournament player, Keith, is kind of a double-edged sword because what are Jackson's paths to fail today at that ownership? Like, what do you need to happen? It doesn't help that it's in a fantastic game script. Point total should see work with Mike Evans. Well, Mike Evans is out, but so is Mike Williams, one of his teammates who garners targets and things like that. So it really couldn't have been a better situation for Justin Jackson to be plugged in. Are you, what are you doing? Do you build and get different elsewhere? Are you fading him to some degree? Some people are probably going to lock button him because that's what they do and they want to go overweight. But at the same token, Keith, you look at some of these other names. I have it sorted by ownership right now for DK. You can find some guys with serious upside, sub 10%. Clyde Edwards-Helaire. We know Tyreek is in, but Kelsey is out. Pittsburgh, if you've seen Pittsburgh the last couple of weeks, not only did Dalvin Cook have his way, but Deontay Foreman was looking like Derrick Henry out there. Michael Carter against the Jags, I just wrote him up for scores and odds. I kind of think 39.5 is way too low. Finally, a game where maybe Michael Carter and the Jets backfield won't get game scripted out of. Of course, Saquon and his reception upside, Javonte Williams. Najee Harris in this Chiefs environment. Yeah, they'll be trailing, but Keith, how often do we talk about his target share with the Steelers here? So this has to be a fascinating week for you with on DK at both sites, really. But of course, Jackson at 42 and Ronald Jones at 51. Gun to head, is there a fade for you? If not, kind of how did you attack this week?
Yeah, it's very difficult. I think all of the chalk is good chalk. Like Justin Jackson to fail at 4,200 with that role, it's going to be tough. I think there is a chance maybe Josh Kelly picks up a little bit of work, but Jackson is still going to get carries. He's going to be involved in the passing game, even if for some reason the script does turn negative on the Chargers. So Jackson is very difficult to fade. Ronald Jones, I think I can get behind just because of the matchup. It's a much tougher matchup, but there's no one else there for Ronald Jones either. So I think he's good chalk. But of those two like super cheap guys, I think I would fade Jones over Jackson. We've seen him fumble or miss a pass block or all kinds of things and just get benched for a game. So Ronald Jones, I guess they're a passive failure, but they don't love Keyshawn Vaughn. Le'Veon Bell, they just signed off the street. There's really not anybody there for Tampa Bay. I think Jones has a great role too. I will look to be slightly underweight on Jones, slightly overweight on Jackson. Mattison, another guy that I think is just completely game script proof. You love the role when Cook is out. He has as good or better of a role than Cook. And James Robinson in that matchup at that price against the Jets on DraftKings, like very tough to see him failing at that price tag. But there's 4 guys right there that are all going to be high owned, and there's still tons of great plays to talk about. You touched on several of them. David Montgomery, I love his matchup in Seattle. Miles Sanders touched on not finding the end zone this year, but I mean, he's gotten carries. I think Philly looks to run the ball a ton in this game against a bad Giants team. So I like Miles Sanders a good bit. You touched on CEH, love that call. Pittsburgh's been getting gashed. Joe Mixon is going to be really underowned. he has a big role. If Cincinnati's playing from ahead, I could see him getting 25 carries. Javonte Williams, a super talented guy that we've been waiting to get a little bit more of a role. I think you can take some shots on him at really low ownership. And the guy I really like down here also is Damian Harris. With no Ramondre Stevenson, Buffalo has a really good pass defense. Their run defense has been a little more susceptible in recent weeks here. I think Damian Harris has a big day today.
Like the Harris call. Josh Jacobs kind of hanging around here too. Still same role without Kenyon Drake. Denver rolling out Drew Lock. Maybe they get gifted some field position. Of course, some recency bias there. Jacobs did not fare well recently, but tons of options here for tournaments. 1247 here for time purposes. Let's move on to wide receiver. Oh, there's a 38% Cooper Kupp, and you know what? It's probably warranted. Like, it's Cooper Kupp. One of the best PPR seasons we've ever seen from anybody at the position. Antonio Brown, without all the weapons here, coming in at 30% on DK, grades out pretty well across the board. You can see all the colorful blips under his name, which means a lot of experts like him as well. Tyreek without Kelsey is probably a fascinating conversation as well. We know Tyreek is in, and Travis Kelsey did not clear protocol, and he is out. Keenan Allen, another alpha receiver without his running mate across the field from him and Mike Williams, which opens up some really cheap value here. It seems like everyone wants to go low here to Josh Palmer. So cash games, you said you can get any wide receiver you want, Britt. What wide receivers do you want to get?
So like any of the, so I'm going to list 4 guys I think you can, that really should anchor your teams today. That's Cooper Kupp, Keenan Allen, Antonio Brown, and Tyreek Hill. You can get like these low tier guys you just don't need, because you can still get some tight end value. You can still get defensive value. We have all this running back value, and sure, the Josh Palmers and Braxton Berrios, right? Do you trust these guys, or do you trust Cooper Kupp and Tyreek Hill to get like 15 targets today? Do you trust Keenan Allen without Mike Williams to get 12 targets and a touchdown? Do you trust Antonio Brown without Mike Evans and Chris Godwin to basically continue what he was doing to start the season, especially on DraftKings, right? Antonio Brown, 4,900. It's a little bit more of a question on FanDuel, but these elite guys are where I'm putting my cash game money in today. I don't think you need to mess around too much. It's not your typical week where we're scrounging around for value. We have that at the running back position. I'm paying up for the wide receiver studs basically across the industry in cash.
Makes sense. Super high floor guys. I like it. Keith, you're into the conversation. Since there's so much condensed ownership, you probably have a laundry list of guys you're targeting to maybe go overweight on here. So let's hear it.
Yeah, definitely. The problem is any of these top guys can absolutely torch you and just bury you if they put up games that they're capable of.
You got to have like one of these guys at least in every tournament lineup you make today.
Agree. Yeah. Yep. I mean, one of them is probably going for 30 points today. So there's just so much upside in that group. As far as the one I would look to be underweight, Cooper Kupp has had a monstrous role this season. But Odell Beckham is there. Van Jefferson is there. Tyler Higbee could get involved. He's the highest priced of them. It's very difficult to fade Cooper Kupp, and I'm not fading him completely. But he's got the biggest ownership number, and it's hard to get overweight on that when you want to play Tyreek Hill, you want to play Justin Jefferson. Antonio Brown's just awesome chalk on DraftKings. Like 4.9 is way too cheap. It's very hard for him to fail at that price. So I think Kupp is the guy I'm going to be slightly underweight on. Tyreek Hill would be the next one. Justin Jefferson, I'm definitely going to make sure I'm overweight on him. I mentioned Thielen coming back. Hopefully that keeps his ownership in check. And I love the spot for Jefferson in a game we expect Minnesota to trail. Should have to throw a bunch. Jalen Ramsey doesn't shadow people. I think the matchup is fine for Jefferson. Mentioned the Cincinnati guys. Love Burrow. So I'm going to have plenty of Chase and Higgins with him. Both of those guys have big upside. In the cheap range, Joshua Palmer is going to be the highest owned guy. I like taking a chance on Tyler Johnson for the Bucks. With them down some guys, I think he can have a big role, should step into the slot role that Godwin usually fills. Like him, can look at Houston for some value. Nico Collins, they're missing Brandon Cooks today, so I think he's going to be involved. Berrios has been thrown out there a little bit, so don't mind him as a pivot. I do like Tyler Johnson and Nico Collins better though.
I'm going to throw 2 really late dart throw wide receivers at you in tournaments. I've got Cortland Sutton with Drew Lock chucking the ball down the field today, And I've got Deshaun Jackson. Who was it? Edwards just got ruled out. Deshaun Jackson, very late. Absolutely, no one's going to be on him. Deep ball prayer in a tournament type of play.
Braxton Berrios, I think, is funny, and you know what? He like just gets peppered with targets. They think he's Jamison Crowder or like Wes Welker or something, but he's not. But I mean, 4.5% ownership. I don't know what his ceiling is, but that's just might be one of those ugly good games. Remember the first game of the year? It was Jacksonville and Houston. Everybody was loading up for GPPs, and it was just, well, here we are, and Urban Meyer's gone, etc. So anyway, on to tight end, and then we'll take some questions here. We had some defense questions in the chat, so maybe we can kind of blend that together here. Cole Kmet garnering 11% ownership here. My computer's running on hamster mode today. I apologize. A good price for him. There's a little bit of weather concerns there. Obviously, Justin Fields is not in that game. Jared Cook is also cheap. I think I have this sorted by points per dollar. Obviously, no Mike Williams there. Foster Moreau, no Darren Waller this week. Croft, I don't know. Dallas Goddard's in a good spot. Kyle Pitts, boy, I want to hear Keith's takes on Kyle Pitts momentarily because I really like him. But for cash games, Britt, where's your head at for tight end?
So on FanDuel, there's two guys for sure. It's either Pitts or Goddard. They're the same price. Pick one, use one. That's basically your FanDuel selection between the day. You've got Goddard, who certainly I think has shown more upside than Pitts this year and looks to be the true number one target in that offense when they do have to pass. I just worry, do they have to pass? And then Pitts has he's going for the rookie tight end yards record. I think he's also a fine play on FanDuel. DraftKings is, so you can play like Pitts. I think I prefer Goddard for sure for cheaper if you're going into that upper tier. You mentioned a couple of the other guys. You've got Foster Moreau, Jared Cook, Cole Kmet. If you're looking for the cheap play, I think they all, they play 100 times. They're all basically about the same. Take your pick between one of those. If you're cheap, probably I like Foster Moreau. Everyone has been sleeping on him a little bit after a couple disappointing weeks. Maybe he can bounce back here at 3,600. And then you've got Kmet at 3,300 if you need someone a little bit cheaper. Just Nick Foles in a game full of snow. There's going to be a lot of check downs, sloppy. That's why I like sort of David Montgomery in the run game in that one. But he could certainly get there as well. Okay. Yeah. And Keith, I'm seeing a lot of low ownership here. It's kind of just screaming to me to fit some of these tight ends with maybe your team stack kind of thing. I'm curious to hear your philosophy here with tight end and some of these expensive guys.
Yeah, talked about a lot of good chalk at the running back and wide receiver position. I think tight end is a good position to differentiate at. You touched on Kyle Pitts. He's one of my favorite ways to do it. Good matchup against Detroit. The yardage totals have been there for him. He finds the end zone. He's going to pay off that 5.8 price tag on DraftKings, especially. Even cheaper on FanDuel. Don't mind him there. Comes with a little bit more ownership there, though. Tyler Higbee is a guy I alluded to also. Love him. Just haven't really seen the role out of him this year, but I'm targeting this game environment. I want some exposure to Higbee. Jared Cook, I think, is in play at that price tag. Missing Mike Williams. I think he could have more of a red zone role. I'm going to be looking to be underweight on Goddard and Andrews, I believe. Gronk with no Godwin, no Evans. Should have he's going to get end zone targets in this game. That's a tougher fade. I want some exposure, but I don't feel the need to be overweight on him necessarily. Foster Moreau, love that price, love the ownership number on him. Think he's very much in play. The Kansas City situation, I think I'm avoiding. It's just, there's Noah Gray, Blake Bell. We don't know who's going to get the run. They're both really cheap. If you want to take shots there, that's fine. I like the upside on the Pitts and the Higbee more. I think Cook even. So I don't think I'll be chasing a cheap tight end in Kansas City.
All right, 12:56 guys, start locking them in. We'll try to breeze through some of these questions. And here's one for you, Britt. With Kelsey out, do we start Tyreek Hill over Kupp in cash, or are you looking to get both maybe?
I think you all season long, if you haven't played, Cooper Kupp is at least $1,000 cheaper than he should be on both sites. So I'm playing Cooper Kupp in cash. I don't know. I expect Tyreek to have a good game. But I think I just trust that Cooper Kupp floor ceiling combo just a little bit more.
Okay. Is Bears defense in play now with the weather? Either of you got a take on the Bears D?
I like the Seahawks D for sure. I think that game's going to be pretty ugly in my opinion.
Yeah, I like the Bears defense. Very cheap. Their pass rush has still been good, even without Khalil Mack. Secondary is banged up, obviously, but I mean, their pass rush has been playing well. The Seattle's offensive line is not great. I like the Bears D.
Okay. I know Devin dropped in a question in chat about stacking Pitts, Gage, and Cordell in Atlanta stack. Is that too much for you guys?
Pitts, Cordell, and was there another one?
Engage. Can you go like
Engage.
mega stack?
No, I wouldn't do all three.
Yeah, I wouldn't do all three either.
I think
Two
Patterson
is totally fine.
Patterson is an amazing low-owned running back play today for sure. And then I love Gage more than Pitts, and I think Pitts is also fine, but I would not go mega Atlanta 4-man stack for sure today.
All right. Keith, Javonte Williams, you like him for GPPs?
I do. Yeah.
Okay. Single entry, Kyle Pitts or Dallas Goedert, Keith?
I prefer Pitts today. I like the ownership number better. I think that the matchup against Detroit in the Dome, I like it.
Okay, sounds good. I think we had a couple of questions, but that might be it for the most part. Anything we want to get out there before the slate locks? Britt, you have any other ideas or thoughts or anything about today's main slate?
No, just a reminder to everyone, we're in the live stream chat on Discord. Head over to that, get Discord if you're still watching the YouTube shows or whatever. The chat is now in the Discord live stream chat. How about some Prize Picks plays? Prize Picks is like my favorite thing in the world now. So I'm going to have sports betting here in New York from my phone, hopefully in a couple of weeks or something like that. But Kyle Pitts is 42.5 yards on Prize Picks. Go hit that. Josh Jacobs, 21.5 receiving yards. Go hit the over on that. Bengals defense, right? You can gamble all your money on Bengals DST points is at 6. I'll take the over on that against Josh Johnson. A couple more. I posted some of my favorites on Twitter if you want to go find those. But yeah, the Prize Picks thing is really nice to me lately.
12:59 Eastern, guys, lock them in. Yeah, you're fortunate. I see. I have the sports books here in PA, but I can't play Prize Picks. I can't play prop game on. Hold on, we got a question coming in. Thoughts on playing Palmer and Justin Jackson together, Keith? Can you pair them together?
They're both cheap enough. Totally fine.
Totally fine. Just cheap enough. 12:59. Sorry, I had a little breaking question news there, but yeah. So sometimes I go over to Jersey or into New York for work, and I'm able to play some Prize Picks. But yeah, really need that. The lines are pretty generous sometimes, Britt, over there on Prize Picks.
Yeah, so you go play on like Underdog, and there's a couple others, right? You get the actual Vegas line on those, and Prize Picks is like, now we want the action. So basically everything's like lower there. So you can, and everyone likes to bet the overs. At least I do. So it's much more fun for me to do that one personally, because the lines seem a little lower. I got Cortland Sutton at 20.5 yards. I mean, that's one pass from Drew Lock today, right? Going deep. I mean, you can get some of these lines are great over there. So you can go to the prop shop. I hang out there with Chiefs put a lot of work into that. And it's just, I'm finding myself to play a lot more of the props and sports betting as I get older and I have less time in life to devote to like tournaments and stuff like
that. Keith, any final thoughts on this main slate? But I mean, they'll see more of us today. We're on for NBA Crunch, I think, and NFL Showdown. So we won't be going anywhere.
Yeah. A lot of Justin and Keith today. So we're coming back for sure on the NBA. About ready to dig into that, but can't wait to see which one of these wide receivers smashes. I mean, getting that right, I think, is the key to this slate. So
it's all of them.
It might be all of them. Yeah,
absolutely. Devin, you got any action going on? You are the showdown interception guru, but I think you're due for a good main slate call here. And now that the King Henry hasn't been back yet, but maybe he's back soon, I want to see what kind of action you're taking, buddy.
I'll give you one that I landed on here as I was putting lineups together right before lock. Panthers D. That's the D I landed on. Get some interceptions today.
Brady might not be the same Brady. We'll see. Ronald Jones was a tough tournament play for me. I understand the game script, but that front is so good. And Keith, you mentioned I'm on the same wavelength. They haven't liked him since they drafted him. I don't even know why they drafted him, but here he is, and here we go, I guess. But anyway, let's go watch some football. Britt, can't thank you enough for filling in. Keith, of course, appreciate you, and you'll be back later. And Devin, of course, you got a long day as well, and we appreciate you. Thank you guys for hitting up the chat here on Discord, and we'll see you in a little bit. Good luck.